He had everything, and he was completely, utterly alone. $1 billion empire, a mansion with 23 rooms, a daughter who drew pictures of a mother she barely remembered, and a man who had forgotten what it felt like to sit at his own kitchen table without wanting to get up and leave. Then she knocked on his door, not because fate sent her, not because she believed in second chances. She came because she had $43 left in her checking account and nowhere else to go. What happened next would cost them both more than either of them ever expected to pay. If this story finds you tonight, drop your city in the comments. I want to see how far this has traveled. Hit like, stay until the end. You'll understand why. The morning Grayson Whitmore turned 32, he stood at the floor-to-ceiling window of his master bedroom and watched the groundskeeper trim hedges that nobody ever walked past. The sky over Greenwich, Connecticut was the particular shade of gray that never quite commits to rain, just hangs there, heavy and unresolved, like a decision you keep putting off. He had a meeting at 9, a conference call at 11, a quarterly review that his assistant had rescheduled twice already because Grayson kept finding reasons to cancel it. On his nightstand sat a birthday card his daughter Lily had made the night before. Purple crayon, lopsided letters, a drawing of the two of them holding hands that made his chest do something he didn't have words for anymore. He picked up the card, put it back down, got dressed in the dark. The mansion at 14 Ashford Lane had been designed by an architect whose name appeared in magazines. 7,000 square feet, a chef's kitchen with imported Italian marble, a library with a rolling ladder on brass rails, a music room nobody used, a garden that cost more to maintain annually than most people earned in 3 years. Grayson had bought it when he was 27, flush with the first real money from Whitmore Technologies, the cybersecurity firm he'd built from a 2-bedroom apartment in Boston while living on instant noodles and stubbornness. He'd bought it because Lydia had pointed at a photo in an architectural digest and said, "Grayson, that's a home." Lydia had been dead for 4 years. He still slept on his side of the bed. Downstairs, the kitchen was the way he'd left it the night before. A coffee mug in the sink, a cereal bowl Lily hadn't finished, the overhead light left on because he'd walked out of the room mid-thought and forgotten to come back. Mrs. Hendricks, the housekeeper who'd worked for them since they moved in, had retired 2 months ago. Her knees, she'd said apologetically, and also, quietly, that the house had gotten too quiet for a woman her age. She'd hugged Lily goodbye for a long time at the door. Since then, Grayson had cycled through 3 agency placements. The first one quit after a week, citing personal reasons that Grayson suspected had more to do with the fact that he'd barely spoken 10 words to her the entire time. The second broke a vase that had belonged to Lydia and spent the rest of the afternoon crying in the utility room, which somehow made it worse. The third simply didn't show up on a Monday and stopped returning calls. His assistant, Dana, had found another candidate. She'd left the folder on his desk Friday afternoon with a sticky note that said, "Please just read it this time." He hadn't read it. He poured coffee, burned the toast, and sat across from Lily while she ate her cereal and told him about a dream she'd had involving a talking rabbit and a mountain made entirely of strawberries. She was 6 years old, and she approached every morning like it was offering her something. He had no idea where she got that from. It wasn't from him. It might have been from Lydia, but he was no longer sure which parts of Lily were inherited and which parts were just Lily being Lily, a separate person arriving daily with her own entirely specific set of observations about the world. "Daddy," she said, around a mouthful of cereal. "Don't talk with your mouth full," she swallowed. "Is someone new coming today?" "Maybe." "Is she going to be nice?" "I don't know, Lily. The last one cried a lot." "I know. Is that why she left?" Grayson looked at his daughter. She was watching him with those eyes. Lydia's eyes, dark brown and steady and entirely too perceptive for a 6-year-old. He felt the familiar tightening in his sternum that happened whenever he was confronted with a question he didn't know how to answer without either lying or opening a door he'd spent years keeping shut. "People leave for all kinds of reasons," he said. "Eat your breakfast." Lily considered this. Then she picked up her spoon and went back to her cereal, apparently satisfied, or at least willing to file the question away for later. Emma Novak arrived at 14 Ashford Lane at 8:45 in the morning, 15 minutes before the appointment the agency had scheduled, because she'd taken the wrong bus and ended up in downtown Greenwich and had to walk the last mile and a half, which meant she arrived early despite everything going wrong. She stood at the iron gate at the end of the driveway and looked up at the house. It was the kind of house that made you feel instinctively that you had arrived at the wrong address. She checked the number on the gate against the address on her phone, checked it again. The agency had said it was a residential position, live-in housekeeper. They had not specifically mentioned that the residence was the size of a small European hotel. She pressed the intercom button. A pause. Then a man's voice, flat and businesslike. Yes? Hi, I'm Emma Novak. I have an appointment. The agency sent me? For the housekeeper position? Another pause. Longer this time, like he was consulting something. Come up. The gate buzzed open. She walked up the stone driveway with her canvas bag over one shoulder and tried not to look like someone who had never in her life stood this close to this much money. She mostly failed. The garden alone. She counted 3 different varieties of rose she recognized from her grandmother's yard in Prague, growing here in Connecticut as if they'd been relocated personally. The front door opened before she reached it. Grayson Whitmore was taller than she'd expected. The agency photo had been a company headshot. Professional, controlled, the kind of image designed to convey authority while revealing nothing. In person, he was just a man in a gray dress shirt with the sleeves rolled to his elbows, holding a coffee mug, looking at her with an expression that wasn't unfriendly exactly, but wasn't warm either. It was the expression of someone who had conducted enough interviews to have stopped pretending they were conversations. "Mr. Whitmore," she said, "thank you for seeing me." "You're early," he said. "I took the wrong bus. Ended up walking." She paused. "I can come back at 9 if you'd prefer." Something shifted slightly in his expression. Not quite amusement, more like acknowledgement. "Come in." The inside of the house hit her differently than she'd expected. It should have felt opulent, and technically it did. The ceilings were high, the furniture was beautiful, the light through the tall windows landed on hardwood floors that had probably been refinished by hand. But underneath all of it, there was a particular kind of stillness. Not the stillness of a house that was carefully maintained. The stillness of a house where people had stopped moving through it the way they meant to. Surfaces held things that had been set down and not picked back up. A child's shoe near the bottom of the staircase, a stack of unopened mail on the hallway table, a coffee ring on the edge of the kitchen counter that had dried there long enough to have that faded permanent look. Not dirty, just lived in, reluctantly. Grayson led her to the kitchen and gestured at a chair across from where he'd clearly been sitting. There was the mug, a legal pad with handwritten notes, a phone face down on the table. "Sit," he said. Not unkindly, just efficiently. She sat. He remained standing, which she suspected was deliberate. "The agency sent your file," he said. "I'll be honest with you. I didn't read it." Emma blinked. "Okay. I'm going to ask you directly instead. Tell me why you need this job." It wasn't what she'd prepared for. The agency had coached her on standard questions: experience, references, availability, familiarity with childcare. She had answers for all of those. She did not have a polished answer for why do you need this, because the honest answer was not the kind of thing you led with in a job interview. She looked at him. He was watching her with the directness of someone who had learned to read people and found most of them wanting. She decided in the space of about 3 seconds that performing composure she didn't have would probably not work on this particular man. "I've been in the country for 8 months, she said. "I came from Prague. I have a work visa. It's valid. I can show you the documentation. I had a position lined up when I came, administrative, for a Czech-owned firm in Manhattan. That fell through 2 weeks after I arrived when the firm closed." She kept her voice level. "I've been picking up whatever I could since then. Waitressing, cleaning offices, some translation work. I have $43 in my account right now, and my sublease ends on the 1st. I need this job because without it, I'm not sure what my options look like." A silence. Grayson was watching her with an expression she couldn't quite read. Not pity, not discomfort. Something more like recalibration. "Most people don't lead with that," he said. "Most people are hoping you won't notice." She met his eyes. "I figured you'd notice." A beat. He pulled out the chair across from her and sat down. "That," she would think later, was the moment the interview actually started. He asked her questions for 40 minutes. Real ones, not the scripted variety. He wanted to know what she'd done before Prague, which turned out to be a longer answer than expected. 2 years at a hotel in Vienna after dropping out of a music conservatory, then back to Prague to take care of her mother through an illness that lasted 3 years and exhausted most of what their family had. When her mother died, there was nothing left. The apartment was mortgaged. Her older brother had a family of his own, and they were barely keeping above water. She had a cousin in New Jersey who told her America was hard but possible. She had believed him, which she now understood had been somewhat naive. "What did you study at the conservatory?" Grayson asked. "Piano and composition, briefly before I left." "Why did you leave?" She looked at her hands on the table. They were not the hands of someone who had spent the last several years at a piano. "My mother needed me, and I wasn't—" She stopped. "It was the right call to leave. I don't regret it." "That's not what I asked." She looked up. He was watching her steadily. "I left because I wasn't sure I was good enough to justify staying," she said. "And because the idea of trying for 10 more years and finding out I wasn't, that felt worse than leaving." He nodded slowly. Not approvingly, not disapprovingly, like he was filing the information away. "There's a 6-year-old, he said. "Lily. She's in school until 3:15. I need someone here mornings and afternoons, available evenings when I have to work late, which is most evenings. Occasional weekends. The duties are standard: cooking, cleaning, laundry, driving Lily if needed. Mrs. Hendrick's job description is in the folder Dana left." "The one you didn't read?" His mouth did something that was almost a smile. "The one I didn't read." "I'm a good cook," Emma said. "Better than good, actually. My mother was particular about food." She paused. "I'm also reliable. I've never walked off a job without notice." "The ones before you didn't work out," he said. "That's not framed as a warning. I'm just telling you so you're not surprised if the position feels difficult in ways you didn't anticipate." She thought about that. "Is it the work that's difficult?" He picked up his mug, looked into it like it had something to say. "The house is quiet," he said. "Some people find that harder than they expected." She looked around the kitchen, at the child's drawing held to the refrigerator with a magnet shaped like a strawberry, at the window over the sink that faced a garden. Nobody was walking in. At the second coffee mug still sitting in the dish rack like someone had washed it and set it out of habit. "I've been in quiet before," she said quietly. "I know how to be in it without fighting it." Grayson looked at her for a long moment. "When can you start?" he said. She started the next morning with 2 suitcases and the canvas bag and a box of kitchen things she'd brought from Prague. Her mother's cast iron pan, a wooden spoon that had been in the family longer than she'd been alive, 3 cookbooks in Czech that she cooked from by memory and instinct more than actual instruction. The room she was given was on the 2nd floor, down a hallway that felt like the quieter half of the house. Smaller windows, lower ceilings, the kind of space that breathed differently than the formal rooms below. It was clean and large by any reasonable standard. There was a window that faced the garden, and a small desk, and a bed that was made up with hotel-quality linens. She unpacked with the methodical efficiency of someone who had done it too many times. Everything had a place within an hour. Then she went downstairs and assessed the kitchen. It took her about 20 minutes to understand what she was working with, and another 10 minutes to understand what was missing. The refrigerator held the food of a household where cooking happened out of obligation rather than pleasure. Basic things, some leftovers in containers that needed to go, a drawer full of condiments of varying ages. The pantry was better stocked, but badly organized. The kind of pantry that grows sideways over time without a logic to it. She made a list. She found the grocery store address in the agency folder. She left a note on the counter. Gone to grocery store, back by noon, and took the bus because she didn't have a car yet, and came back with 4 bags of things that the kitchen actually needed. She made lunch. Not a complicated lunch. Roasted tomato soup from scratch. Real tomatoes, not canned. Olive oil, a little thyme from a pot on the windowsill that she'd noticed was still alive despite what appeared to be months of minimal attention. and a grilled cheese that she made properly, with real butter, low and slow, so the bread turned that specific shade of gold that required patience. She had it on the table by 1:15. At 1:40, Grayson appeared from his office upstairs, still on a phone call, one hand pressed to his forehead the way people do when a conversation is going in a direction they don't like. He walked into the kitchen, saw the table, and stopped. He looked at the soup, he looked at the sandwich, he looked at Emma, who was at the sink washing up, and who did not turn around. He finished his call in less than 3 minutes, which, she would later learn from Dana, was unusually fast for a conference call with the Singapore office. He sat down. He picked up the spoon. He didn't say anything for a while. "This is good," he said finally. Emma dried her hands on a dish towel. "I'll do a proper grocery run this weekend. I made a list if you want to look it over." He was already reading it, which she hadn't expected. Most people in his position, she assumed, didn't concern themselves with grocery lists. He read the whole thing, then folded it once and set it in his shirt pocket. "Get whatever you need," he said. "There's a card in the drawer by the phone." She nodded. "The soup," he said. "Yes?" "What's in it?" She told him. He nodded slowly, the way people do when they're memorizing something without meaning to. He finished the whole bowl. Lily was a different experience entirely. Emma picked her up from school the first time on a Thursday. Grayson had a board meeting that ran late. Dana called to pass along instructions. Emma took the address and the car that turned out to be a black Volvo SUV that still had Lily's car seat installed in it, a detail that struck her without her being able to articulate exactly why. Lily came out of the school with her backpack on and her jacket half unzipped and a painting in each hand that she was holding away from her body so they wouldn't smear. She spotted Emma standing by the car. The other parents all seemed to know each other, and Emma very much did not, and stopped on the sidewalk. "You're not Mrs. Henderson," Lily said. "Mrs. Hendricks, no, my name is Emma." "Are you the new one?" "I'm the new one." Lily studied her with the frank assessment of a child who has learned that new things sometimes don't stay. "How do you say your name again?" "Emma. It's the same in most languages." "Do you speak other languages?" "Czech, some German. My English is getting better." Lily considered this with visible interest. "I'm learning French at school. I only know how to say hello and one food." "That's a start." Emma opened the back door. "Which food?" Lily climbed in and buckled herself with the focused concentration of someone who had very recently learned to do it independently and was still proud of this fact. "Croissant," she said, "but I think I say it wrong." "You say it exactly like the French do," Emma told her, "which is very different from how Americans say it." Lily seemed deeply pleased by this. They drove home mostly in silence, punctuated by Lily's observations. A dog she saw on the sidewalk that she felt strongly was the biggest dog she had ever seen, a cloud formation that she believed looked like a fish, the information that her best friend Sophie had gotten a loose tooth, and this was apparently a major development. Emma listened to all of it. At home, Emma made Lily a snack: sliced apple, a piece of cheese, some crackers arranged in a way that required a small amount of extra effort, and produced a plate that looked, as Lily immediately observed, like a face but a happy one. Lily sat at the kitchen counter and ate her snack and told Emma about the painting she'd done at school, which depicted, she explained, the family she was going to have when she grew up. There was a house and several indistinct figures and what appeared to be a very large orange animal. "Is that a lion?" Emma asked. "It's a dog," Lily said. "A big one." "Like the one we saw today?" Lily's eyes went wide. "Yes, exactly that one," Emma smiled. She turned back to the counter and began prepping for dinner. She had a chicken going in the oven that she needed to check, vegetables to cut, a sauce she'd been thinking about since she'd seen the herbs in the pantry that morning. After a few minutes of quiet, Lily said, "Do you like it here so far?" Emma glanced over her shoulder. "I've only been here 2 days." "But so far?" "So far," Emma said, "it seems like a house that wants to be warmer than it is." Lily thought about this with the concentrated seriousness she brought to most things. "Because Mommy's not here anymore," she said. Not sadly, exactly. More like someone stating a fact that they had spent considerable time coming to terms with and we're still in the process of understanding. Emma stopped cutting. She put the knife down carefully. "Your dad told me about your mom," she said. "I'm sorry." "She got sick," Lily said. "I was 2, so I don't really remember her. But Daddy has pictures, and sometimes he talks about her." A pause. "Not a lot, but sometimes." "That sounds about right," Emma said softly. "Did you ever lose someone?" Lily asked. Emma picked up the knife again. "My mother," she said. "A few years ago." Lily was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "Is it weird that I miss someone I don't really remember?" Emma looked at her. This small person with her father's jaw and her mother's eyes, asking a question that most adults spent years avoiding asking themselves. "No," Emma said. "I don't think that's weird at all." Lily seemed to accept this. She went back to her crackers. By the time Grayson came home at 7:15, the kitchen smelled like roasted chicken and garlic and something herbed and slow. He walked in and stood at the doorway the same way he'd stood the first day. But this time Lily was at the table working on a drawing and Emma was at the stove, and there was a particular quality to the room, the warmth of it, the smell of it, the occupiedness of it, that stopped him at the threshold the way a change in temperature stops you when you walk in from the cold. "Hi, Daddy," Lily said without looking up. "Emma says we're having chicken." "Okay," he said. "She let me help cut the herbs." "Did she?" "I cut the flat ones. The curly ones were too slippery." Grayson looked at Emma. She was stirring something at the stove and had not turned around. "Flat parsley and curly parsley," Emma said. "The curly kind moves when you try to cut it." "I held it down," Lily said, "but it kept going." "Next time," Emma said. "Next time." It was such a small thing to say, such an ordinary, forward-looking, unexamined thing to say. Grayson stood in the doorway of his kitchen and felt something he didn't have a name for move through him quietly, like weather. He washed his hands and sat down at the table. "Tell me about your day," he said to Lily. And Lily, who had been waiting with the patience of a child who has learned not to lead with everything immediately, launched into a full account of Sophie's tooth situation, the painting, the face-shaped snack plate, the biggest dog in the world, and the French word she already knew. Grayson listened. He ate the chicken, which was the best thing that had come out of his kitchen in 4 years. He listened to his daughter's voice fill up the room the way it hadn't in a long time. Across the table, Emma ate quietly and didn't say much. When she did speak, it was to answer a direct question or to add a detail to something Lily was explaining. She didn't perform. She didn't angle for his approval. She was simply there, present in the way some people are present, without requiring acknowledgement of the fact. He noticed it. He told himself he was simply registering the contrast. That was all. After dinner, Lily needed a bath and homework checked and a story read, which was apparently a negotiation that involved her selecting 3 books and being talked down to 2, a process that Emma navigated with a matter-of-fact firmness that Grayson recognized from somewhere, possibly from himself, though he was usually less successful at it. He sat in the hallway outside Lily's room while Emma read to her. He was not exactly listening, or he was, but he was also doing something else, sitting in the hallway of his house at 8 o'clock at night, with his back against the wall and his eyes closed, and the sound of Emma's accented voice carrying the words of a book about a small bear who couldn't sleep was passing through the door and through him, and the house around him felt less like an inventory of empty rooms than it had in longer than he could account for. He sat there for a while. When Emma came out and found him in the hallway, they both went very still for a moment in the mutual awkwardness of a thing that wasn't easy to explain. "She's asleep," Emma said. "She goes fast when she's tired," he said. "I noticed." A pause. They were both standing in the hallway and there wasn't a natural next thing to say, so Emma nodded and turned toward her room. "Emma," she stopped. "The dinner was—" He paused, like he was choosing between several things and discarding most of them. "Thank you," he said finally. "For today." She looked at him in the dim hallway light. He looked, she thought, like a man who had said thank you in a way he meant and wasn't entirely sure what to do with that. "Good night, Mr. Whitmore," she said. "Grayson," he said, "you don't have to—" "Good night, Grayson," she said, and went to her room and closed the door and sat on the edge of her bed in the dark for a long time, thinking about nothing in particular and several things all at once. The weeks that followed moved in the particular rhythm of a household finding its shape. Emma learned the house the way she'd learned other places she'd had to make work, not by forcing herself into it, but by paying attention to what it already was. The kitchen became hers in the way that kitchens do when someone cooks in them every day with intention. She knew which burner ran hot, which drawer had the scissors, where Grayson kept the coffee he actually liked hidden behind the coffee he kept out of habit. She learned Lily's particular gravitational field, the stuffed rabbit that had to be within arm's reach for sleep to be possible, the aversion to any food where two things were touching each other on the plate, the way she needed 5 minutes of quiet when she got home from school before she was ready to talk, the fact that she was working on a comic book about a girl detective and would update Emma on the plot developments with a seriousness that Emma met at exactly the level it deserved. She learned Grayson in smaller increments. He worked constantly. This she understood within the first week. His office was on the second floor, the door frequently closed, and the sounds that came through it, phone calls, the clipped language of a man who ran meetings rather than attended them, established a rhythmic background to the days. He ate at his desk more often than not. He came down for dinner when he came down, and when he didn't, Emma left a plate in the oven without comment. He did not make small talk. Not because he was cold. She was beginning to understand that he wasn't cold exactly, but because he seemed to have made some long-standing arrangement with himself about how much of his interior life to show, and he kept it scrupulously. But he listened. This she noticed. When she said something, really said something, not the procedural conversation of a household running its routines, but something with content to it, he was actually there. His eyes focused. He asked follow-up questions. He remembered what she'd said the next time it was relevant. One evening, about 3 weeks in, she was in the kitchen when she heard piano music. Not from the music room, but she'd looked in there twice, seen the piano under its dust cover, noticed the stillness it had the way untouched instruments have. This was coming from Lily's room, a tablet propped on the bed, a children's channel playing simplified versions of classical pieces. She mentioned it later when Grayson passed through the kitchen. "Lily's been watching piano videos." He stopped. "What kind?" "Children's ones. Simplified arrangements. She asked me if I knew what the pieces were." "Did you?" "Beethoven, Chopin, one Debussy." She kept her voice neutral. "She has a good ear." She identified them faster than most kids would. He stood in the middle of the kitchen with his hands in his pockets. "Lydia played," he said. Then, like he'd said more than he meant to, "Piano." "I know," Emma said. She didn't explain how she knew. The photograph in the music room, the one she'd seen through the open door. A woman at the covered piano, laughing at something off camera, her hands just lifting from the keys. He didn't ask how she knew. "She's been asking about lessons," Emma said carefully. "Lily, she hasn't asked you directly. Think she's working up to it." Grayson was quiet for a moment. "She should ask me directly." "She will," Emma said. She doesn't want to bring up something that might be hard for you." He looked at her sharply. Not angry. Something that was closer to startled. "She's 6, he said. "She's very observant," Emma said. "She watches you carefully." The silence that followed was the kind that has weight. Grayson stood in his kitchen and looked at the countertop, and Emma went back to what she was doing, and after a minute he said quietly, "She told you that? That she's worried it would be hard for me?" Not in those words, but yes. Another silence. He turned and walked back toward his office, and Emma thought he was going to say nothing more, but he stopped at the doorway. "If she asks," he said, without turning around, "tell her the answer is yes." He went back upstairs. Emma put the lid back on the pot. She stood at the stove for a moment, looking at nothing. The house shifted around her the way houses do at night, the particular small sounds of a large structure settling. A creak of wood, the hum of the heating system, the distant sound of Lily's tablet from upstairs. It was the quietest house she had ever been in, and she was beginning to understand that the quiet was not the absence of things. It was the presence of things that hadn't been said yet. She turned the heat down and went to set the table. The piano lessons started on a Saturday in October. Grayson had made the call himself. A music school in the next town over. A teacher named Mr. Ferris, who came highly recommended and charged accordingly. He'd told Lily at breakfast, matter-of-factly, the way he delivered most good news, without build-up or ceremony. And Lily had gone so still for a moment that he'd thought he'd somehow said the wrong thing. Then she'd slid off her chair and wrapped both arms around his waist, with a force that surprised him, and said nothing, which was how he knew it mattered. Emma had been at the counter when this happened. She'd kept her eyes on what she was doing, which he appreciated. The first lesson was 45 minutes. Emma drove Lily there and back while Grayson took a call he'd been avoiding all week. When they returned, Lily came in through the front door talking before she'd fully gotten it open. Mr. Ferris had shown her where middle C was, and she'd played a simple song with both hands, and there were black keys and white keys, and they had different names. And did Emma know that the piano had 88 keys, because Lily had counted them, and that was a lot. "I did know that," Emma said, unwinding her scarf. "How many have you played?" "Most of them." Lily stopped walking. "All at the same time?" "Not usually," Emma said, "though sometimes it feels like it." Lily found this enormously funny. Her laugh, loud, slightly undignified, fully committed, rang through the front hall and up the stairs, and Grayson, who was standing at the top landing still holding his phone, heard it and stood there for a moment, not going anywhere. He'd forgotten, or stopped noticing, how much space Lily's laugh used to take up, how it used to feel like it was filling the house from the inside out. The last year or so, it had gotten quieter. He told himself she was just growing up, getting more self-contained. But hearing it now, that particular unguarded version of it, he understood something he'd been not understanding for a while. The house had been getting quieter because he had been, and Lily had been following his lead. He went back into his office and closed the door and sat down at his desk without picking up the call again. Outside, rain had started against the windows, the soft, preliminary kind that doesn't commit to anything yet. He could hear Lily downstairs still talking, Emma's voice answering in lower registers, the comfortable back and forth of it carrying up through the floor. He sat there for longer than he should have. Then he opened his laptop and got back to work. The thing about living with someone you're slowly revising your opinion of is that it happens in increments you don't track until you're looking back at them. Grayson had not set out to pay attention to Emma. He'd hired her to run the house, and she ran the house, and that was the arrangement. He was self-aware enough to know that the previous women who'd held the position had all, in various ways, required something from him: reassurance, guidance, the performance of an employer who engaged warmly with his staff. He hadn't had it in him. He'd been operating at a deficit for years, and he'd learned to manage it by keeping his transactions clean. Emma didn't require anything from him. This was, at first, simply efficient. Then it became something he noticed in a different way. She navigated his moods without performing the navigation. She wasn't walking on eggshells. She just seemed to have an accurate read on what a given morning or evening called for, and she met it there without making it a thing. Some mornings he came down tightly wound from a night of poor sleep and back-to-back early calls, and she put coffee in front of him and left him alone. Some evenings he came downstairs looser, the day having given him something instead of taking it, and she was there at the stove with something on and they talked. Not about anything significant, just the texture of ordinary conversation. And he realized in those moments that he had not had that in a very long time. Ordinary conversation with another adult at the end of a day. He found himself staying in the kitchen after dinner more than he used to. He wasn't sure when that had started. He'd come down to eat, and Lily would go to do her homework, or her drawing, or the comic book that was apparently developing an increasingly complicated subplot involving a stolen jewel and a talking cat, and he and Emma would be at the table with the dishes between them and the particular quiet that follows a meal, and he'd find a reason to stay. The remaining coffee, a question about the week's schedule, a piece of news he'd read that had some small relevance to something she'd mentioned. He was not naive about what he was doing. He understood on some level that he was finding reasons. He also understood that understanding this did not make him stop. One evening, mid-November, he came down from his office at nearly 9 to find her at the kitchen table with a cup of tea and a book, and the overhead light off. Just the range hood light on above the stove, which gave the kitchen a particular amber quality that made it look like a different room than it was in the daytime. She looked up when he came in. "Sorry," he said, slightly uncertain, which was an unusual state for him. "I didn't realize you'd be—" "I'm not in your way," she said. "Do you want tea?" "Coffee," he said, though it was 9 at night and he'd already had too much, and they both knew he didn't need it. She got up and made it. He sat at the table and picked up the book she'd set face down to mark her page, and looked at the cover. It was in Czech. "What's this one?" "A novel. It's old. 1960s. It was my mother's." She set the coffee down in front of him and sat back down with her tea, pulling her cardigan tighter around her. "What's it about?" She thought about it for a moment. A man who can't stop building things. Structures, cities, systems. And the more he builds, the more isolated he gets from everything he originally wanted to build things for. She looked at the cover. It doesn't end well. Grayson wrapped both hands around his mug. Cheerful. My mother had unusual taste. There was a small wry quality in her voice when she said it. Not pain exactly, more like the complicated affection of someone whose grief has had enough time to settle into something livable. "How long has it been?" he asked. "Since she died?" 3 years in February. He nodded. He knew the specific arithmetic of that kind of date, the way you continue tracking it involuntarily, the way your body keeps the calendar long after you've decided you don't need to. 4 years for me, he said. Lydia. The sentence sat between them. He wasn't sure why he'd said it. He said her name so rarely, out loud to anyone. He said Lily's mother sometimes, or my wife in the past tense in conversations that required it. But her name, her actual name, he kept somewhere else. Emma didn't say she was sorry. She didn't make the face people made. She looked at him directly and said, "Tell me something about her." He wasn't prepared for that. What? Something small, not the big things. She held her mug with both hands. The small things are what you miss. He looked at his coffee. He was aware, somewhere underneath the reflex to deflect, that this was a gift she was offering him. The specific kind that could only come from someone who'd done their own version of it. She burned toast, he said, every single morning. She would put it in, and then she'd get distracted by something and forget, and the smoke alarm would go off. And she would act completely surprised every time. He stopped. The corners of his mouth moved before he could stop them. Every single morning, for 6 years. Emma smiled. It wasn't a sympathetic smile. It was the smile of genuine recognition. My mother left the water running, she said. Every time she washed vegetables. She'd turn it on, start washing something, and then she'd turn to talk to me and the water would just be going and going. Our water bill was absurd. Did you ever tell her? Every week. She shook her head. She'd agree it was a problem and do the same thing the next day. He looked at her across the table. The amber kitchen light was doing something to the room, making it smaller and warmer and further from the rest of the house. He was very aware all at once of the fact that they were sitting together at 9 o'clock at night in his kitchen talking about their dead mothers. He should probably go back upstairs. The toast thing, he said. Lily does it sometimes too. He paused. I never told her that's where she gets it. You should, Emma said. Those kinds of things... She stopped. Sorry. I don't mean to tell you how to... No, he said. You're right. He was quiet for a moment. She asks about Lydia sometimes, and I answer, but I don't... He put the mug down. I don't volunteer things. I wait to be asked. Because you're not sure what's the right amount to tell her. Because I'm not sure how much she can hold. Emma was quiet for a moment. She can hold more than you think, she said. Kids usually can. They don't need the whole weight of it. They just need to know it's real. That their mother was a real person who did real things, good and bad, not a photograph. He looked at her. She seemed to realize a beat later that she'd said something that landed somewhere, and she dropped her eyes to her mug. The toast thing is a good one, she said more quietly. That's the kind she can hold. He picked up his coffee. Drank some. Outside, the wind had picked up. He could hear it working against the windows on the north side of the house. "You're good with her," he said. "Lily. She's easy to be good with." "She's not easy," he said. "She's a lot. She's—" He stopped, and something moved in his face that wasn't quite a smile. "She's a lot." "Yes," Emma said, "but the right kind." He stood up then, because he'd been sitting there long enough and the conversation had gotten into territory that he hadn't cleared with himself in advance. "I should let you finish your book." She nodded, picked it up again. He rinsed his mug, which he didn't usually do, and set it in the rack, and went back upstairs and lay in bed staring at the ceiling for a while. He was not thinking about anything specific. He was mostly just lying there, in the particular way of someone who has been somewhere different and is still making the return. It took him longer than usual to fall asleep. December arrived with the abruptness it always does in New England. A hard frost one night, and then you reach for the lighter coat and it's suddenly wrong, and you understand that the season has shifted without announcing it. The mornings went dark. The garden behind the house settled into its winter shape. Lily started wearing a hat she refused to take off indoors, a striped knit thing she'd picked out herself, that she wore straight through dinner and twice fell asleep in. The house changed with the cold in ways that Emma was beginning to understand. The kitchen became the warmest room, not just in temperature, but in the way the household organized itself around it. Lily did her homework at the kitchen table instead of her room. Grayson started eating breakfast downstairs with actual regularity, instead of the protein bar and coffee at the desk arrangement that Dana had apparently accepted as his normal operating mode. Emma began cooking differently too. Not because anyone asked her to, but because winter food is different from other food. It's heavier, more particular, slower. She made soups that needed the afternoon to become what they were. She made bread on Saturdays, which filled the whole house with a smell that was almost argumentatively domestic. She made the chicken paprikash her mother used to make on cold Sundays, and Lily ate 2 servings and spent the remainder of the meal calling it the orange one, and asking if they could have it every week. "Not every week," Emma said. "Every 2 weeks," Lily negotiated. "We'll see." "That means yes," Lily told Grayson, very quietly, across the table. "I know what it means," he said. Emma looked at the two of them. Sometimes she caught moments like that, small, private ones, the specific frequency of a parent and a child who have figured out each other's codes. She looked away quickly when she caught them. They weren't for her, but she kept catching them. The first time Dana visited the house, it was a Thursday afternoon in early December. Grayson's assistant, mid-40s, efficient, with the bone-deep competence of someone who had been managing other people's complicated lives for a long time, came to drop off documents that Grayson preferred in hard copy. She'd met Emma briefly at the door, and Emma had shown her to Grayson's office, and then gone back to the kitchen. 20 minutes later, Dana came downstairs alone. Grayson's call had run long. Emma made her tea because she was making it anyway, and Dana sat at the kitchen counter and looked around the room with an expression Emma couldn't quite read. "The house is different," Dana said. Emma looked at her. "Different how?" "Just different." She wrapped her hands around the mug. "I've been coming here for 4 years. It's always—" She stopped. "You've been here, what, 2 months?" "Almost 3. "Right." Dana sipped her tea. She had the kind of eyes that were hard to have a conversation in front of, because they were taking things in faster than the conversation was going. "He's eating dinner." "Most nights, yes." "He wasn't before. He'd have something at his desk or not at all." She said it neutrally, informational. "He seems to like to eat at the table with Lily," Emma said, equally neutral. Dana looked at her for a moment. Then she smiled, which changed her face considerably. "You're very careful," she said. "I work for him," Emma said. "It's his house." "That's not what I mean." Dana set down the mug. "I mean it as a compliment. The last few—" She stopped again. "He didn't make it easy. It took someone with actual patience." Emma didn't say anything. She refilled the kettle because it needed refilling. "He doesn't talk about Lydia," Dana said after a moment. "Not gossiping. Something quieter than that. Or he didn't. To anyone." Emma kept her eyes on the kettle. "He talked about her at dinner last week," Dana said. "Lily told me. Apparently he told Lily that her mother used to burn the toast every morning. Emma put the kettle on the base. She turned around. Dana was watching her with an expression that was both knowing and careful. "I'm not prying," she said. "I've known him since before Lydia died. I'm just—" She picked up her mug again. "It's a good sign. That's all." Emma didn't respond to that either, but after Dana left, she stood in the kitchen for a moment with her hands on the counter and looked out the window at the winter garden and felt something she hadn't let herself feel directly yet. Something that lived at the edge of her understanding of her own situation. Something she pushed back from, firmly, on the grounds of practicality and common sense and the very basic fact of what she was in this house and what she was not. She pushed it back. But it took some effort. The Saturday before Christmas, Grayson came downstairs at 8 in the morning to find the kitchen transformed. Emma had apparently been up since 6. There was dough on the counter, the oven was on, the table had been cleared and covered with what turned out to be the beginning stages of Christmas cookies, which Lily had extracted a promise of at some point, the terms of which Emma had apparently agreed to without fully understanding what she was signing up for. Lily was already at the table in her pajamas and the knit hat, wearing one of Emma's aprons that came down to her ankles, looking deeply focused over a bowl of sprinkles. Grayson stood in the doorway. "You're up," Lily said. She said it the way children say it, as a fact delivered without any particular expectation attached. "It's 8 in the morning," he said. "We've been up since 6. He looked at Emma, who was at the counter with flour on her forearm and an expression that suggested the morning had already been more than she'd anticipated. "She was enthusiastic," Emma said. "She's always enthusiastic." "She has strong opinions about sprinkle distribution," Emma said. "I like them even," Lily said seriously. "Emma says that's hard to do, but I think if you're careful enough—" "You can do anything if you're careful enough," Grayson said, going to the coffee maker. "Exactly," said Lily, satisfied. He made coffee and sat at the table. He'd planned to go back upstairs with it, get started on the quarterly review that had been following him around for weeks. But he was sitting there, and Lily was explaining her sprinkle methodology to him with genuine technical rigor, and the kitchen smelled like butter and vanilla and the kind of morning he'd stopped expecting to have. "Can you roll?" Emma said. She was looking at him. She had a rolling pin in one hand and more dough to get through, and the expression of someone making a practical assessment. "What?" "The dough. Lily is doing the sprinkles, I'm cutting the shapes, I need someone on rolling duty. I haven't baked anything and—" "It's not complicated," she said. "You push a cylinder across the dough. It makes it flat." Lily giggled. He looked at his daughter. She was watching him with that particular brightness she got when something she wanted was about to happen. He stood up. Emma handed him the rolling pin. It took him 3 tries to get the thickness right. Emma corrected him twice, briefly, without fuss, the way she corrected Lily. And by the 4th section of dough, he had it. He was not good at it exactly, but he was competent, which seemed sufficient. Lily had appointed herself quality control inspector and periodically inspected his work with a gravity that suggested the fate of something important was at stake. "This one's too thick on the edge," she said, pointing. "Roll toward you," Emma said, not looking up from the shape she was cutting. He rolled toward himself. "Toward you means the dough," Emma said. "Not your body." "What's the difference?" She looked at him. He was holding the rolling pin and had clearly not, in fact, known the difference. For a moment, something passed between them, a shared recognition of the absurdity of the situation, and she laughed. A short, real one. Not polished, just a laugh. He hadn't heard her laugh before. Not like that. He'd heard the quiet version, the one she gave Lily's jokes, but not this. He looked at the dough and rolled it the right way. They baked for 2 hours. By the end, the kitchen was lightly destroyed in the productive way of a kitchen that has been used, and there were approximately 70 cookies cooling on every available surface, and Lily had eaten 3 before they were technically finished and was now listing slightly where she sat from a combination of sugar and deep satisfaction. Grayson looked at the cookies. He looked at his daughter. He looked at the kitchen, the actual state of it, the flour on the counter, and the dirty bowls and the organized chaos of something that had been made rather than purchased. "This is a lot of cookies," he said. "I underestimated Lily's ambition," Emma said. She was at the sink, starting on the dishes. Her sleeves were pushed up and there was still flour on her arm, and she was washing dishes in his kitchen on a Saturday morning, looking entirely like someone who had been doing this for years. He picked up a dish towel. "I dry," Lily announced, though she was clearly not going anywhere from her chair. "You sit," Grayson said. "Supervisory role," Lily said. He stood next to Emma at the sink. She washed, he dried, and for a while neither of them said anything, just worked through the stack of bowls and cutters and spatulas, and Lily talked at them from her chair about her plans for the cookies, who would get which ones, the specific aesthetic qualities she was looking for in the ones she planned to keep. And the kitchen was warm and loud in the particular way of a room that is full. He was aware, very specifically, of Emma's arm near his when she reached for the next dish, the proximity of it. He was aware in the way you're aware of a thing you've been not noticing and then suddenly are. He kept drying. After Lily had gone upstairs to present her father's assistant with a cookie via text message photo and some extensive accompanying commentary, Grayson stayed at the kitchen counter with his second coffee and watched Emma wipe down the surfaces with the particular efficiency she brought to every task. "She talks about you," he said. "Not planning to. It just came out." Emma paused. "What does she say?" "That you showed her how to hold a knife properly. That you told her it was okay to miss her mother even though she doesn't remember her." He wrapped his hands around the mug. "That you're teaching her to say things in Czech." Emma set down the cloth. "Is that all right, the Czech thing? She asked me how to say things and It's fine." He looked at her. "It's more than fine." A pause. "She told me you said that missing someone you don't remember isn't weird." Emma met his eyes briefly and then looked at the counter. "It's not." "No," he agreed. "It's not." He didn't say what the thing underneath that was. He wasn't ready to, and he knew it. But he also understood, standing in his kitchen the Saturday before Christmas with flour on the counter and 70 cookies and his daughter upstairs, that whatever arrangement he'd made with himself about Emma, that she was the housekeeper, that she ran the house, that what was between them was professional and clear. That arrangement had been quietly renegotiated by the weeks themselves, without his permission and without hers. And there it was. He didn't do anything about it. He went back upstairs to his quarterly review. But he left the dish towel folded over the oven handle instead of dropping it in the hamper, which was a habit she'd established, and he'd apparently picked up without realizing it. Upstairs, behind the closed door of his office, he sat at his desk for 10 minutes before he opened the laptop. He was not thinking about the quarterly review. Christmas itself was quiet. They decorated the tree the weekend before. Lily ran the aesthetic, which meant the lower third was extremely densely ornamented, and the upper two-thirds required adult intervention. Emma had found ornaments in a box in the storage room, wrapped in old tissue paper, and some of them were Lydia's. She'd asked Grayson before touching them. He told her to put them up. She'd unwrapped each one carefully and handed them to Lily one at a time, and Lily had asked about each one, and he'd answered, and it had been hard in the way things are hard when they are also, somehow, right. On Christmas Eve, after Lily was asleep, he came downstairs to find Emma sitting by the lit tree in the front room with her Czech novel and a glass of wine she'd apparently decided to allow herself. She looked up when he came in. "I thought you were in bed," she said. "I couldn't sleep." She moved her legs to make room on the sofa, then stopped herself, uncertain. He sat in the chair across from her instead. The tree lights were doing things to the room, making it amber and specific, like a room inside a painting. "Are you all right?" she asked. "Yeah." He looked at the tree, at a particular ornament near the middle, a small silver bird that had been the first Christmas ornament Lydia ever bought, from a street market in Vienna, before they were married. He'd forgotten it existed until Lily unwrapped it last week. "She found it in Vienna," he said. "Lydia. She was there for a conference. She didn't even know if I'd like it. She just bought it because it was pretty." Emma looked at the ornament. She didn't say anything. "She always did that," he said. "Bought things she liked without checking if other people liked them too. I used to find it—" He stopped. "I thought it was careless sometimes. I'd tell her to think about whether we needed something before she bought it." He was quiet. "We had this argument about a lamp once. 45 minutes. Over a lamp." Emma waited. "It's in the living room," he said. "The lamp, I still have it." He looked at his hands. I hate that I argued about the lamp. You were married, Emma said. People argue about lamps. I know, He stopped again. I keep cataloging the wrong ones, the stupid arguments, the times I was distracted or short-tempered or too busy. There's enough good in there too. There's plenty of good. But the catalog I come back to is the one that still has something to answer for, Emma said. He looked at her. Yes, he said. She didn't tell him he was wrong to feel it, or that he should forgive himself, or any of the usual things. She just looked at the tree for a moment and then back at him. The cataloging doesn't mean you loved her less, she said. It might mean you loved her enough to hold the full account, not just the good parts. He sat with that. The tree lights reflected in the dark window behind the ornaments. Outside it had started to snow, light and preliminary, the kind that doesn't stick but means business is coming. The house was completely quiet, except for the two of them, and whatever it was that had been building between them all these weeks that he still hadn't found the right word for. He wasn't ready to find it. Thank you, he said. For today. For all of it. He meant the cookies, the tree, Lily's face unwrapping the ornaments. He meant December. He meant more than that, and they both probably knew it, and neither of them said so. Merry Christmas, Grayson, Emma said. He looked at her one more time. Then he got up, said good night, and went upstairs. In her chair by the lit tree, Emma sat with her book open in her lap, not reading it. She looked at the silver bird ornament. She thought about Vienna, which she knew, and street markets, which she loved, and a woman she had never met who had bought a small silver bird because it was pretty without checking if anyone else would like it. She thought about the letter in her suitcase, the one she'd been carrying for 8 months and had not decided yet what to do with. She sat with the tree lights until they blurred. Then she closed her book and went to bed. January came in hard. A nor'easter hit the Connecticut coast on the second day of the new year, the kind of storm that doesn't announce itself politely. It just arrives. And then it's everywhere, and the world outside reduces to white noise and gray sky and the particular helplessness of a house that has been cut off from everything that isn't itself. The power went out at 6 in the evening, mid-dinner, and the kitchen dropped into a darkness that was total for about 3 seconds before Grayson got up and found the utility drawer and the flashlights he kept there for exactly this reason. Lily thought it was thrilling. Like camping, she said, from the sudden dark. It's nothing like camping, Grayson said, clicking on a flashlight. We've never been camping, Lily pointed out. Exactly. Emma had already found the candles. She'd noticed them weeks ago in the pantry, a cluster of emergency votives and 2 proper taper candles in a drawer that also held birthday candles and a lighter that still worked. She lit them without being asked and set them along the kitchen counter and on the table, and the room shifted in the way it does by candlelight, everything warmer and more uncertain around the edges, shadows moving with the drafts. Lily pressed her nose against the window and watched the snow. It was coming sideways now, which she found personally offensive, as if the storm were showing off. Can we make hot chocolate? She asked. The stove is gas, Emma said. It still works. Yes, Lily said, with the finality of someone confirming a decision that was never really in question. Grayson checked the generator. It was in the garage, and it worked, but it only covered the heating system and the refrigerator, not the main power. The electrician had told him this 2 years ago, and he'd meant to upgrade it, and hadn't. He came back inside with snow on his shoulders, told Emma which circuits were live, and she nodded and adjusted. The evening rearranged itself around what was available. No screens, no overhead lights, no dishwasher. Lily found this improved rather than diminished the situation, and organized herself at the kitchen table with her sketchbook and a flashlight propped between 2 mugs, working on the comic book with focused pleasure. Emma made hot chocolate, real hot chocolate, milk warmed on the gas burner with actual cocoa powder and a little salt and something from the spice cabinet that turned out to be cardamom and that Lily initially regarded with suspicion and then declared to be the best decision anyone had ever made. Grayson sat at the table with them. He had his phone. The battery was full. He could work from it. And he looked at it for a while and then set it face down on the table. Outside, the storm pressed against every window. Your comic book, Emma said to Lily. What's happening with the stolen jewel? Lily looked up from her sketchbook. The question, Emma had learned, was the right one to ask, because Lily had been working on this story for 2 months, and it had developed to the point where it had subplots and recurring characters, and a villain whose motivations Lily had explained at length on several occasions and felt strongly were misunderstood by the general public. So Mira figured out that the jewel isn't actually stolen, Lily said. The person who says it's stolen is the real thief. He stole it first, years ago, and then someone stole it back from him, and now he's pretending to be the victim. That's a reversal, Grayson said. He was looking at the sketchbook from across the table. That's what makes it complicated, Lily said, because you feel sorry for him at first, and then you find out, and you have to decide if it changes how you feel about the beginning. A short silence. Does it? Emma asked. Lily thought about this seriously. I think yes and no, she said. He's still bad, but some of the bad things he did were because someone bad did something to him first. She tapped her pencil on the table. Mira has to figure out if that matters. Does it matter? Grayson asked. I don't know yet, Lily said. I haven't decided. Grayson looked at his daughter across the candlelight. There were moments, not frequent, but they came, when Lily said something that had a weight that stopped him. He tended to stay very still in those moments, as if sudden movement might interrupt whatever was happening. Emma was looking at Lily too, with an expression he'd come to recognize over these months, a kind of clear-eyed attention that she gave Lily regularly, as if Lily were someone worth taking seriously. Lily, who had not had many adults in her life who took her seriously in quite that way, had responded to it accordingly. They stayed at the kitchen table for 2 hours. The storm didn't let up. At some point, Emma made soup from what was in the refrigerator. A practical soup, nothing elaborate, just the thing that made sense to make when the power was out and the night was long and there were 3 people in a kitchen with candles going. Lily fell asleep in her chair partway through the second cup of hot chocolate, which was less surprising than it appeared given that it was past 9 and she'd been drawing with intense concentration for hours. Grayson carried her upstairs. Emma came behind him with a candle, lit the way through the dark hallway to Lily's room, and held the light while he laid Lily down and got her shoes off and pulled the blanket up. The rabbit was already there. It was always already there. Lily had a gift for making sure of this. He tucked the blanket up around Lily's shoulders, and she made a small sound, but didn't wake. In the hallway, he and Emma stood with the candle between them. She's a good kid, Emma said. I know, he said. He meant it without qualification. They went back downstairs, and Emma began cleaning up, and Grayson sat at the kitchen table and picked up his phone and then put it down again. The soup was still warm in the pot. The candles were at their midpoint. The storm outside showed no interest in being finished. Will you play? He said. She turned from the sink. Play what? He didn't answer right away. He was looking at the doorway that led to the hall that led to the music room, and she followed his gaze and understood before he said anything else. I haven't, she started. I know. He looked at her. The piano in there. It's been covered since... He stopped. I've been meaning to have it tuned. I haven't. It might be off. Probably. She stood at the sink with her hands still wet and looked at him in the candlelight. He was watching her in the way she'd come to understand was characteristic of him. Direct, without performance, asking for the thing he was asking for without dressing it up. All right, she said. She dried her hands. She picked up one of the candles. The music room was at the end of the main hall, a room she had walked past many times and entered only once, briefly, to dust. It was the least used room in the house. The furniture in it was good, but arranged without warmth, like a room that had been designed rather than lived in. The piano was an upright, older, the kind that had been chosen because someone played rather than for show. The dust cover came off and she folded it and set it on the bench. She pressed a key. Grayson was right. It was slightly off. But not badly. The way an old instrument gets when it's been kept in a temperature-controlled house. It still had its voice, just not quite the exact one it had been given. She sat. She hadn't sat at a piano in 8 months. She had walked past the upright in the hotel lobby during the weeks after she first arrived, had stopped once with her hand on the fallboard, and then kept walking because it was neither the time nor the place, and she hadn't been certain she still could. She'd studied for 4 years at the conservatory before she left, and the 4 years after that, the years of hotels and hospitals, and a city that was grinding itself down to survive under its own weight. Those years had taken the practice out of her hands without taking the music from her head. The music was still there. She just hadn't checked recently if her hands remembered what to do with it. She played a scale first, slowly. Her right hand, then her left, then together. The slightly off tuning sat underneath it like a voice with a small imperfection, human rather than perfect. The sound filled the room and moved into the hallway. Grayson sat in the chair near the window. He'd brought a candle. The light from it reached him and stopped short of her. She didn't ask what he wanted to hear. She played what she knew, which was most things, and started with something she'd learned early, a Chopin nocturne, B-flat minor, the kind of piece that begins gently and means it. Her hands remembered more than she'd given them credit for. The muscle memory of 10,000 hours of practice doesn't go away just because you stop. It waits. It just waits, patient as anything, until you come back. The room was very quiet except for the piano and the storm outside. She didn't play perfectly. There were moments, a transition in the left hand she'd always found difficult, a phrase in the upper register that wanted more precision than her fingers found on the first try. She didn't stop for those. She played through them the way you walk through difficult terrain, working with what the ground gives you. When she finished, she sat for a moment. "That was Chopin," she said. "I know." His voice was different, lower. She looked at him. He was watching her with an expression she hadn't seen before and couldn't fully read in the candlelight. "Did Lydia play that one?" she asked. "She played it badly," he said. "She said it was too sad and she always played it anyway." Emma turned back to the piano. She played another piece, lighter, a Schubert impromptu that moved quickly and had that quality of brightness that is also somehow melancholy, in a way that is hard to explain to people who don't play. When she finished, the storm outside seemed closer than it had before, as if the music had made the walls thinner. "You're good," Grayson said. "Better than good." "I was better at 22, she said. "I lost years." "You didn't lose them. They're still in there." She looked at her hands on the keys. She hadn't thought of it that way. She'd spent a long time thinking of those years as subtraction, everything she'd given up, all the practice that didn't happen, the recitals she didn't play, the trajectory that had bent and then stopped. She hadn't thought of the years themselves as something she still had. "Play something else," he said. She played for an hour. By the end, the candle between them had burned down considerably and the storm had shifted, still present but lower in pitch, moving toward whatever came after. Lily hadn't woken. The soup was cold. Neither of them had moved. When she stopped, the silence was a different kind than the silence before she'd started. "I used to sit in this room," Grayson said after a while, "after Lydia died. Not to play? I don't play. Just to sit. I stopped after about 6 months. I couldn't—" He looked at the covered chair near the piano, the one that faced it directly, where someone would sit to watch someone else play. "I couldn't figure out what I was doing in here without her." Emma kept her hands on the keys but didn't play. "Then it became the room I didn't go into," he said. "And then I stopped thinking about it." He looked at her. "I stopped thinking about a lot of things. It was easier." "I know," she said. "I know you know," he said. The candle threw his shadow against the wall, long and distorted. He looked tired in the way she'd started to recognize. Not the surface tired of a long day, but the deeper kind, the kind that has been accumulating for years without adequate clearance. "I don't know what to do with this," he said. His voice was very quiet. She turned on the bench to face him. The piano was behind her. The room was almost dark except for the candle. "With what?" she said, though some part of her knew. He looked at her steadily. "You know what?" She did. She'd known for weeks in the way you know things when you've been paying attention, and the evidence has been accumulating, and you've been choosing not to reach a conclusion because the conclusion has consequences you haven't agreed to yet. "Grayson, I'm not asking you for anything," he said, quickly, flatly, like he was getting something out in front of a thing he expected to be worse. "I know what this is. I know what the situation is. You work here. You work for me. I'm not—" He stopped. I'm not the person who makes this into something it shouldn't be. She sat with that. But, he said, I'm also done pretending I don't know what's been happening for the last 4 months. Outside, the storm pressed and the house settled around them. She looked at him across the room and felt the full weight of what he was telling her and the full weight of what she hadn't told him, and those two things pressed against each other in her chest in a way that was not comfortable. I care about you, she said. The words were careful and true and insufficient. And Lily, I care about this house and what it's becoming. She paused. But there's something. She stopped. He went very still. There's something I haven't told you, she said. The candle between them guttered in a draft from somewhere. The flame leaned and recovered. What? He said. Not a question, a word that had stopped moving. She looked at her hands. She thought about the letter in her suitcase, which she'd been carrying for 8 months, which had been written before she'd arrived in America, which had been written by a woman she had loved very much, and whose son was sitting across from her in a dark room asking her to account for herself. She had thought many times about how to say it. She had rehearsed versions of it in the mirror in her room late at night. None of them had felt right. All of them had felt like they were coming too early or too late or at the wrong angle entirely. Your mother, she said. He didn't move. I knew her, Emma said. Not well, and not recently, but I knew her. The room was very still. How? He said. One word. I was 19. I was in Vienna, my first year at the conservatory. I was having... She stopped. Started again. I was in a bad situation. A professor there. It was a complicated thing, a situation that got out of hand and I didn't have anyone to go to. I didn't have money or connections or... She looked at the piano keys. Your mother was at a conference. She was staying at the hotel where I worked part-time. I don't know why she stopped. I don't know why she noticed, but she did, and she helped me. She paid for me to move to a different residence. She found me a lawyer when I needed one. She spent 3 weeks making sure I was safe before she left. She looked up at him. He had not moved. His face in the candlelight was unreadable. We stayed in contact, Emma said. Not constantly. Letters, occasionally. She was the kind of person who didn't forget a face she'd decided to care about. She swallowed. When she got sick, the last year of her life, she wrote to me. I still had the same email. She told me about the illness. We exchanged letters for about 6 months. She stopped. In the last letter she wrote, she asked me something. What did she ask you? Grayson said. His voice was different now. She could hear it even across the room. Controlled, tight. The voice of a man who was holding several things very still by force of will. She said she was worried about you, Emma said. Not in a crisis way. She wasn't asking me to do anything dramatic. She just said that you'd been alone for a long time and that she'd watched you from a distance and that you had a little girl and that you were building walls faster than you could count them. She paused. She said that if I was ever near you, if I was ever in a position to... She asked me to look after you if I could, not to force anything, just to be present if the chance came. Grayson stood up. He didn't say anything. He walked to the window, which showed nothing but the dark and the reflection of the candle and his own face at an angle. He stood with his back to her and one hand pressed against the window frame, and his shoulders were very tense in the way of a person who is processing something that requires all their available space. Emma waited. She did not feel the silence. She had said what there was to say, and now there was nothing to do but let him have his time with it. When he turned around, his face had changed. Not fallen apart. He wasn't a person who fell apart outwardly. She'd understood that long ago. But something had closed behind his eyes. A door she'd been watching open, very slowly, over 4 months, had swung shut. So you were sent, he said. No, she said. I needed a job and the agency. Emma. I wasn't sent, she said. Your mother made a request. She died and I came to America because I had nothing left in Prague, and a cousin in New Jersey, and an address from an agency that matched me to your household because I had the right experience. I didn't arrange it. I wasn't placed here deliberately. It was... She stopped. It was a coincidence that felt too complete to be one. I know how that sounds. It sounds, he said slowly, like you've had 4 months to decide how to say it. That landed. She looked at him. Yes, she said. I have. And I kept not saying it because what? Because it was the wrong time or because you were afraid of what would happen when you did? Both, she said quietly. Grayson, everything I've done here, Lily, the dinners, the Christmas, She pressed her hands together. None of it was a performance. None of it was fulfilling a promise. I came because I was desperate. I stayed because I need you to go, he said. The words were flat and quiet, and they hit her the way quiet things sometimes hit harder than loud ones. She sat with them for a moment. She looked at the piano. She looked at the candle. She looked at him, standing in the dark at the window with his face closed and his arms crossed and his jaw set, and she recognized the expression because she'd seen versions of it on herself in the mirror in the years after her mother died, when the safest thing had seemed like the only thing. All right, she said. She stood up. She picked up the candle. I'll leave in the morning, she said. The storm? In the morning, he said. She walked to the door. She stopped at it, but she didn't turn around because she had already said everything and there was nothing left that would help. She loved you, Emma said. Your mother. She talked about you in those letters the way people talk about the thing they're most proud of and most afraid for at the same time. She paused. I don't think she sent me. I think she hoped, because that's what people do when they're running out of time. They hope things into the universe and then they're gone and the universe does what it wants. She went into the hallway. Behind her in the music room, she heard nothing. Not a step, not a word. She went upstairs and sat on the edge of her bed in the dark and did not cry, which took considerable effort, and stared at the wall and listened to the storm, which was finally, gradually, beginning to quiet. In the morning, she packed her 2 suitcases and her canvas bag and the box with her mother's cast iron pan. She came downstairs at 7. Grayson was already in his office. The door was closed. She could hear him on a call. She made Lily breakfast because she didn't know how not to. Scrambled eggs, the way Lily liked them. Dry, with a little cheese, no runny parts. She put the plate in front of Lily, who had come downstairs in her pajamas and the hat, and who looked at Emma's coat hung over the back of the chair and at the suitcases in the hallway with an expression that was attempting to be confused but was not quite making it. Are you going somewhere? Lily asked. Emma sat down across from her. She had thought about how to do this and had not arrived at anything good because there was nothing good. There was only honest, and even that had limits when you were talking to a 6-year-old. I have to leave, Emma said. Lily looked at the eggs. Why? It's complicated, sweetheart. Because of Daddy? Emma paused. Your dad and I need to figure some things out, and while we do, I'm going to stay somewhere else. Lily was quiet for a moment. She picked up her fork. Put it down. The others left too, she said. Not accusatory, factual in the terrible way a child can be factual about something they've decided not to feel all the way yet. I know, Emma said. Lily, you're different though, Lily said. She said it the way she said things she'd decided, finally, and after considerable thought. You're different from the others. Emma looked at her, at the hat, the dark eyes, the untouched eggs. I hope so, Emma said. Then why are you going? Emma didn't have an answer that was both true and kind. She reached across the table and took Lily's hand for a moment. Lily let her. Sometimes, Emma said carefully, adults make mistakes, and then they have to fix them before they can figure out what comes next. That's what's happening. It's not about you. I know it's not about me, Lily said. I'm 6. Emma almost smiled. Almost. At 7:45, she called a car. She carried the box out first, then a suitcase. On her second trip, Grayson was at the top of the stairs. He stood there. She stood at the bottom with her suitcase. They looked at each other across the stairwell, which felt like a longer distance than it was. He looked terrible. Not in a visible way. Nothing she could point to specifically. Just the particular look of a man who had not slept and was currently choosing not to speak about it. She didn't ask him to reconsider. She had said what she'd said the night before, and she was not going to retract it. And she was not going to perform contrition for something that wasn't only her fault, and she was not going to make this harder than it already was. The grocery order comes Thursday, she said. The delivery code is in the blue folder in the kitchen drawer. He said nothing. Lily's piano lesson is Saturday at 10. Mr. Ferris prefers you call rather than text if you need to reschedule. Still nothing. There's soup in the refrigerator, the orange one. Lily will want it this week. She picked up the suitcase. She walked out the front door and got into the car that was waiting at the end of the drive. And she did not look back at the house because if she looked back at the house, she would not be able to do what she was doing, and she needed to be able to do what she was doing. The car pulled out through the iron gate and onto the road, and the mansion at 14 Ashford Lane disappeared behind the bare winter trees. Emma sat in the back seat and looked straight ahead at the road. After a while, she opened her bag and took out the letter. The one she'd been carrying for 8 months, the last one his mother had ever written to her, the one with the request she had never agreed to and never refused. She held it on her lap without unfolding it. She already knew what it said. She'd read it so many times the paper had gone soft at the folds. She put it back in her bag. The car drove toward the city. The sky above Connecticut was the pale, washed-out white of a storm that had spent itself overnight, clean and bleak and going nowhere fast. Behind her, a house that had spent 4 months learning how to be warm was going cold again. And somewhere upstairs in that house, a door that had nearly opened all the way was standing closed, and the man behind it was sitting at his desk with his hands flat on the surface, not working, not moving, staring at the wall across from him, a wall on which there was a photograph of his mother taken years ago in some city he recognized, laughing at something off camera. He stared at it for a long time. Then he opened his laptop. And across the room, on the shelf above the door, where Emma had placed it weeks ago when she'd found it in a drawer and thought it deserved better than a drawer, a small silver bird ornament from a street market in Vienna turned slowly in the heat from the vent below. The house didn't go cold all at once. That was the thing Grayson hadn't expected. He'd expected an immediate reversion, the way rooms snap back to their former state the moment you stop occupying them. But the house held on to Emma for longer than he would have thought possible. The smell of her cooking lingered in the kitchen walls for 2 days. The herbs on the windowsill, the ones she'd been keeping alive since September with water, and the particular attention she gave small things that required it, stayed green for a week before he noticed they needed water and watered them badly, too much at once, and 2 of them didn't recover. The arrangement of the kitchen didn't change immediately because he didn't rearrange it. The groceries she'd ordered, delivered on Thursday as she'd said, showed up in their usual bags, and he put them away in the places she'd organized them and stood in the middle of the kitchen afterward feeling like a man who has learned a language from someone and then been left alone in a country that speaks it. Lily was the harder thing. She didn't cry, which was almost worse than if she had. She went quiet in the particular way she'd been quiet in the months after Lydia died. Not withdrawn, not difficult, just turned down a degree or two, as if she'd found a setting between her full self and absence and had decided to operate there until further notice. She ate what he made, which was not soup and was not particularly good but was edible. She went to school, she came home, she worked on her comic book. On Saturday, he drove her to piano lessons. Mr. Ferris, a compact, gray-haired man with the patient demeanor of someone who had taught children for 30 years and no longer took anything personally, shook Grayson's hand and led Lily into the lesson room. And Grayson sat in the waiting area on a chair designed for someone considerably smaller than him and looked at his phone for 40 minutes without actually seeing anything on it. On the drive home, Lily said, "She taught me the Czech word for piano." "What is it?" "Clavier." She said it carefully, getting the accent right in the way she'd apparently practiced. "It's almost the same." "Almost," he agreed. She said most music words come from Italian, and they kind of spread out into all the languages. He kept his eyes on the road. "She told you that?" "She tells me lots of things." Lily was looking out the passenger window. "She told me that when she was at school learning piano, she used to practice so long her hands hurt, and she'd have to stop and put them in warm water." A pause. "She said it was worth it, even though she didn't finish." "She told you she didn't finish school?" "She said she left to take care of her mom." Lily turned from the window. "Like how you take care of me?" He didn't answer that. "Daddy." "Yeah." "Is she coming back?" He stared at the road ahead. The Connecticut winter landscape scrolled past, bare trees, gray sky, the particular bleakness of January that doesn't have the novelty of December's cold, and hasn't earned February's promise of being the last of it. I don't know, he said. It was the first time in a long time he'd answered Lily's direct questions with honesty instead of management. She seemed to understand it as such. She turned back to the window and didn't ask anything else, and they drove the rest of the way home in a silence that was at least the honest kind. That evening he made pasta. He followed the instructions on the package in a way he hadn't needed to do in 4 months, and he overcooked it, and the sauce was from a jar, and Lily ate it without comment. He sat across from her at the kitchen table, Emma's kitchen table, the one where she'd made the grocery lists and read check novels by candlelight, and laughed at him for not knowing which way to roll dough. And he ate overcooked pasta in a kitchen that was technically warm because of the heating system and cold in the way that had nothing to do with temperature. He thought about what Emma had said in the music room. She hoped things into the universe, and then she was gone, and the universe does what it wants. He had not let himself think clearly about his mother since Emma left. Every time he started to approach it, the whole shape of it, his mother writing letters to a woman she'd met once in Vienna, carrying some version of worry about him across years and through illness and up until the end, he found something else to do. He was good at finding something else to do. He'd been doing it for 4 years. But at the kitchen table, with the pasta and the silence and the jar sauce, he couldn't fully avoid it anymore. His mother. Eleanor Whitmore, who had been a corporate consultant for 30 years and had also, without telling him, been the kind of person who helped a 19-year-old in a bad situation in a Vienna hotel and then stayed in touch for over a decade, who had been ill for a year before he knew how serious it was because she didn't want to worry him, and who had died in March 2 years after Lydia, which meant he'd lost both of them inside 30 months and had responded by building the thickest possible wall around what remained and calling it stability. He hadn't known about Emma. He hadn't known his mother knew her. And the thing he was sitting with now, the thing that had felt like betrayal the night before and was starting, unwillingly, to feel like something more complicated, was the question of what exactly he was angry about. Emma had not lied. She had withheld something. Those were not the same, and he knew they weren't the same, which was inconvenient because it made it harder to stay as angry as he wanted to be. She had withheld it because she was afraid of exactly what happened when she said it, which meant she'd known for 4 months that the information would cost her something, had carried that knowledge the entire time through the dinners and the Christmas cookies and the music room and all the evenings at the kitchen table, and had stayed anyway. He put his fork down. Lily looked up. "What was the Czech word again?" he said. "Clavier." She watched him. "Why?" "I'm just thinking." He picked up his fork again. "Eat your pasta." She ate her pasta. He sat there and thought, and the thinking was uncomfortable in the way that honest thinking usually is. Dana came by the following Tuesday. She came under the pretense of dropping off documents, the same pretense as her last visit. And this time she sat in the kitchen for 30 minutes and drank the coffee Grayson made, which was not as good as the coffee that had been made in this kitchen for the last 4 months, and said nothing about Emma until Grayson brought it up, which he did after 15 minutes because Dana's patience for waiting him out was functionally infinite, and he was not in the mood to lose a silence contest. "She told me about my mother," he said. Dana looked at him over her mug. "I know." He stopped. "You knew? About my mother and Emma?" "No, not until Emma left. She called me." Dana set the mug down. "She wanted to make sure Lily had someone to call if she needed anything." He sat with that for a moment. Emma, having just been asked to leave, calling his assistant to make sure his daughter had a safety net. "She told me the basics," Dana said. "Vienna, the letters, what your mother asked." "And?" Dana looked at him directly. She had never in 4 years of working for him been anything less than straight, which was primarily why he'd kept her. "And I think you know what I think." "Tell me anyway." "You're angry because it scared you," she said. Not because she was dishonest. She withheld something significant. Grayson. Dana's voice was patient and entirely inflexible. She withheld it because she was terrified of exactly this. She was in a house with a man who was already half convinced that nobody stays, and she had a piece of information that looked like it could confirm that fear, and she was trying to figure out how to say it without losing everything. She paused. She wasn't protecting herself. She was trying to protect what was happening here. "You don't know that." "No," Dana said. "I don't. But I know what this kitchen looked like before she got here. And I know what Lily sounded like. And I know that your mother, who I worked for briefly years ago, and who was not a person who made careless requests, asked her to do this because she had good judgment about people and she thought Emma was someone worth trusting. She picked up her mug. I'm not telling you what to do. I'm telling you what I see. He looked at the table, at the wooden spoon in the crock by the stove, Emma's mother's spoon, the one from the family kitchen in Prague, the one she'd packed along with the cast iron pan. She'd forgotten it when she left. He'd noticed it the morning after. He'd put it back in the crock and not moved it since. She left a spoon, he said stupidly. Dana followed his gaze to the crock. Something softened in her expression. Her mother's, she said. She mentioned it when she called me. She was upset about it. He stood up. He went to the crock and took out the spoon and turned it over in his hands. It was old. The wood had darkened with years of heat and use, the kind of patina that only comes from a long time of being used for its purpose. His mother had had a spoon like this. He'd watched her cook with it his entire childhood without knowing it was anything other than a spoon. He put it back. He turned to Dana. Where is she? Dana looked at him for a moment. That's not something I can just... Donna, she sighed. She was already reaching into her bag. She's staying in Bridgeport, cousin's couch, from what I understand. She's been applying for positions. She pulled out a folded piece of paper and set it on the table. She asked me not to give you this. I'm giving you this. He looked at the paper. Don't make me regret it, Dana said. She stood up, finished her coffee, and picked up her coat. Also, your quarterly review was due last week. Just noting that. She let herself out. Grayson sat at the kitchen table with the folded paper in front of him for a long time. He didn't open it. He sat there while the light through the windows changed, the flat winter morning light going toward the flatter winter afternoon light. And he sat with the whole shape of it, everything he'd been avoiding thinking about, and he let himself think about it. His mother had spent the last year of her life writing letters to a woman in Prague. That woman had come to his house desperate for work and had been placed there by an agency with no knowledge of the connection. She had recognized his name when the placement came through. It would have been impossible not to, and she'd made a choice to come anyway. And then she'd spent 4 months in his house being entirely, stubbornly, inconveniently real. And at the end of it, she'd told him the truth, and he'd told her to leave. He thought about the question Lily had posed in her comic book. Does it change how you feel about the beginning? He thought about Emma at the piano in the candlelight, her hands finding music they'd lost years ago. He thought about her at the kitchen counter with flour on her arm, telling him the curly parsley moves when you try to cut it. He thought about the night by the Christmas tree when he'd told her about the lamp, and she'd said you loved her enough to hold the full account. He thought about her in the hallway outside Lily's room with a candle, after reading Lily to sleep, both of them standing there in the mutual awkwardness of something that had no clean category. He thought about his mother, who had been dying, who had known this woman for over a decade, who had asked her, not commanded, not arranged, asked, to be present for her son if she ever could be, who had done this because she was worried, because she had watched him from a distance and seen the walls going up and had done the only thing she had available to her, which was to hope. He understood, sitting there in the kitchen of a house that had been warm and was now measurably less so, that he had done exactly what his mother had been afraid he would do. He had found a reason. He had found the one thing that could be framed as a threat, and he had used it to do what he would have done eventually anyway, because he was a man who had been doing it for years and had gotten very good at it. He picked up the paper. He unfolded it. It was an address in Bridgeport and a phone number, and below that in Dana's handwriting, not Emma's, Dana's, a single line. She left something in the kitchen drawer, blue one, bottom shelf. He went to the kitchen. He opened the blue drawer on the bottom shelf, which he'd opened 100 times in the last week without looking at it properly, and there, underneath a dish towel and a spare set of keys and the various objects that accumulate in kitchen drawers, was an envelope. Not sealed, just folded closed. His name was on the front in handwriting he didn't recognize. Then he did recognize it. He had one letter from his mother in his desk upstairs, written before she lost the strength for it, and this was the same hand. He stood very still. Then he opened it. She had written it to Emma, not to him, which made sense because she hadn't known it would reach him. It was dated 14 months ago, which meant she'd had perhaps 3 months left. The handwriting was shakier than he remembered. His mother's hand had always been precise, but it was hers. He read it standing at the kitchen counter. She wrote about Emma the way you write about someone you respect enormously and have watched from a distance and trust without reservation. She wrote about Vienna, briefly, just a paragraph, the hotel, the situation, what she'd done and why she'd done it, which was simply because it was the right thing, and she'd been raised to understand that the right thing and the easy thing were rarely the same, and you chose the right thing without expecting anything back. She wrote about him. She wrote about Grayson the way a mother writes about a son when she thinks no one is reading, fully, clearly, with the accuracy that comes from having known someone since before they knew themselves. She wrote that he was stubborn in the way of people who are terrified of being wrong because being wrong means being exposed. She wrote that he was capable of extraordinary tenderness, but that he'd learned, after Lydia, to keep it under strict management, and that this was killing something in him slowly. She wrote that Lily deserved a father who was fully alive and not just present, and that she was afraid he was going to choose presence over aliveness indefinitely because it was safer. She did not instruct Emma to fix him. She was not that kind of woman. She asked, simply, gently, in the same measured voice she'd used for as long as he could remember, for Emma to be in his life if she could be, to be her real self, to not perform or minimize or make herself small. She said that if anyone could remind her son that being known by someone was not the same as being at their mercy, it was Emma. She said she was sorry she was leaving before she could see how things turned out. She said she loved him. Grayson put the letter down on the counter. He stood there for a long time. The kitchen was quiet. Through the window, the winter garden held its bare shape against the white sky. In the crock by the stove, the wooden spoon stood the way it always had. He was not a man who cried easily or often, and he did not fully cry now, but there was a pressure behind his sternum that was the accumulated weight of a lot of things. 4 years of Lydia, 2 years of his mother, and 4 months of Emma, and the long unacknowledged loneliness of the mansion that had been a house, and then briefly a home and was now a house again. And he let himself feel the weight of it without moving away from it, which was not something he'd done in a long time. After a while, he heard the front door. Lily came in from school with her backpack and her hat, calling out for him before she'd finished opening the door, which she did most days, and he heard himself answer from the kitchen, and he heard her drop her bag in the hall and come through to find him. She stopped in the kitchen doorway. He was still standing at the counter. He didn't try to rearrange his face. She was going to see what was on it regardless. She came over and stood next to him and looked at the letter. Then she looked at the window. Then she leaned against his arm, which was the Lily version of an embrace. Not wrapped around, just leaning, full weight against his side, steady. He put his arm around her. They stood at the kitchen counter together for a while, looking at nothing in particular. "Daddy," she said. "Yeah." "Are you going to go get her?" He looked down at her. She was looking up at him with complete directness. The dark eyes, the hat slightly askew, the comic book artist's practical approach to complicated situations. "I'm thinking about it," he said. "That means yes," she said. He almost smiled. "When did you get so sure about everything?" Emma says that being sure about what you want is different from knowing how to get it. She pulled away and went to the refrigerator, businesslike, the conversation apparently complete from her end. She says the first part is the important part. He looked at the letter. He folded it carefully and put it in his shirt pocket. He made Lily a snack, apple slices, cheese, crackers, arranged approximately the way Emma arranged them, though he got the face slightly wrong, and Lily corrected the placement of the cracker eyes without comment, and they sat at the kitchen table while she told him about her day, and he listened, and after a while he said, "I have to make a call." "Okay," Lily said. He went into the hallway. He took out his phone. He stood there for a moment. He thought about what Dana had said. She was trying to protect what was happening here. He thought about the letter. He thought about a woman in a music room in the dark, playing a piano that was slightly out of tune, her hands finding something they'd lost and then finding it again, saying, "I wasn't sure I still could," and playing anyway. He dialed the number. It rang 4 times. He was preparing himself for voicemail. She picked up. Silence on both ends for a moment. He could hear, faintly, the background sounds of an apartment, a television somewhere, the particular acoustic of a small space. "Emma," he said. A pause. "Yes." "I read the letter." She didn't say anything. He could hear her breathing. "My mother," he said, and then stopped because there was too much in that direction and he hadn't cleared a path through it yet. "She had good judgment," he said instead. "She always had good judgment. It used to drive me crazy when I was younger. She was right more often than I was comfortable with." Another pause. "Grayson, I was wrong," he said. It came out flat and direct because that was the only way he knew how to say things that were important, not about being hurt. "I was hurt. That part was real. But I sent you away because I was scared and I called it something else, and that was—" He stopped. "That was wrong." The television sound in her apartment, the small sounds of a city outside her window, whatever window she had now. "I'm not calling to ask you to come back," he said. "Not yet. I'm calling because you left without— There were things I didn't say. Things I should have said in the music room before I—" He stopped again. He pressed his hand against the wall of the hallway, the same hallway where he'd watched her come in on her first day with her canvas bag and her $43 and her particular, quiet, stubborn dignity. "You didn't owe me the information about my mother. It wasn't yours to deliver. It was something she put on you without your permission, and you carried it for 4 months in a house full of things that could have gone wrong at any moment, and you kept being—" He looked at the ceiling. "You just kept being yourself. And I took the first reason that came along to treat that like a threat." He could hear her breathing change. "The soup," he said. "The orange one. I made it wrong. I tried on Wednesday. Lily told me to try, and I—" He stopped. "I don't know what I did, but it was wrong in about 6 ways." A sound from her end that was close to a laugh, wet around the edges. He stood in the hallway and held the phone and let that sound settle through him. "You have to cook the onions longer," she said quietly, "until they're almost gone. Most people don't wait long enough." "How long?" "Longer than you think you should." He stood there. He was aware of Lily at the kitchen table behind him, apparently deeply involved with the cracker arrangement, but listening with the unself-conscious focus of a child who has decided something important is happening. "Can I see you?" he said. I'm not asking you to come back to the house. Just to see you. To have a conversation that isn't—" He stopped. "The last one ended badly, and I don't want that to be the last one." A long silence. "There's a coffee shop," Emma said, "on State Street in Bridgeport. It's open Saturday mornings." "I know Bridgeport. It has good coffee." A pause. "The owner is Czech. She'll be pleased if you try to say hello in Czech." "I don't speak Czech." "I'll text you one word," she said. "It's not hard." He stood in the hallway of his house with the letter in his shirt pocket and his daughter at the kitchen table and his hand against the wall. Outside, the January light was doing the thing it did in the late afternoon, going gold before it went dark. And the house around him held the particular stillness of a place that has had life in it and is waiting for it to return. "Saturday," he said. "Saturday," she said. He hung up. He stood there for a moment, not moving. Then he went back into the kitchen and sat across from Lily and looked at the cracker face she'd repaired. "Well?" she said. "Saturday," he said. Lily picked up a cracker eye and ate it. "Good," she said. He sat at the table and didn't say anything else, and Lily went back to her snack and then to her comic book. And the kitchen was quiet in the way that is different from empty. The quiet of a space that is holding its breath, waiting to see what comes next. On the shelf by the stove, the wooden spoon was still in the crock. He hadn't moved it. He wasn't going to. She texted him the word Friday night. "Dobry den. Good day?" In Czech. Below it, 2 syllables each. The R is slightly rolled, but don't overthink it, or you'll sound like you're gargling. He read it sitting at his desk after Lily had gone to bed, and he read it 3 more times, and he practiced saying it quietly in his empty office the way a person practices something they're slightly embarrassed to care about getting right. He didn't sleep well. He hadn't been sleeping well since she left, but this particular bad sleep was a different quality than the previous ones. Less the hollow, grinding insomnia of the week before, and more the restless, alert kind that comes when something important is the next day and your body hasn't figured out how to stand down yet. He was at the coffee shop on State Street in Bridgeport by 8:45 Saturday morning, which was 15 minutes before they'd agreed to meet, and he was aware that arriving 15 minutes early was the information about himself that he didn't particularly want to be giving away but couldn't entirely help. He ordered a coffee at the counter. The owner, a small, older woman with sharp eyes and an expression suggesting she had seen everything twice, looked at him when he ordered, and he said, without planning to, "Dobry den," in what he suspected was a deeply imperfect approximation. The woman looked at him for a moment. Then she smiled, genuine and wide, and said something back in rapid Czech that he did not understand a word of, and handed him his coffee. He sat at a table by the window. The coffee was, as advertised, very good. At 9 o'clock, he saw Emma through the glass. She was coming up the street in her coat, the canvas bag over one shoulder, and she was looking at her phone and not at the window, so he had a moment to look at her before she saw him. She looked tired, not wretchedly so, but the kind of tired that 5 weeks on someone's couch produces, the particular exhaustion of not having a place that is yours. She also looked, he thought, like herself. Not a diminished version, just herself, a little worn around the edges, the same way the piano in his music room was slightly off tune, but still entirely present. She looked up and saw him through the glass. They looked at each other for a moment through the window. Then she came in. "You're early," she said. "So are you," he said. She was 2 minutes early, but still. She unwound her scarf and sat across from him, and the owner came over immediately, said something to Emma in Czech, and Emma responded, a real exchange, fluid, the two of them clearly having talked before, and the owner went back for another coffee. Emma set her bag down and looked at him across the small table. "You said Dobry den to her," Emma said. "She told you that in the time it took her to get your coffee?" "She said a man who looked like he owned something came in and tried Czech. She seemed to find it—" Emma paused. "She said Trojski, which means—" "Concerning?" Emma said, and the corner of her mouth moved. He wrapped his hands around his mug. She wrapped her hands around hers when it arrived. They sat there, two people at a small table in a Bridgeport coffee shop in late January, and the first 30 seconds of silence were the hard kind. Not hostile, just waited with everything that needed to happen now that they were in the same room again. He'd had 5 weeks and a drive from Greenwich and 15 minutes sitting by himself to prepare for this conversation, and he still did not have a clean beginning for it. He had always been better at the middle of things, the negotiation, the problem-solving, than the opening. Lydia used to say he related to life the way he related to meetings, always arriving after someone else had set the agenda. "How's Lily?" Emma asked. "She made me call you." Emma looked at him. "Not directly. She doesn't operate that directly." He turned the mug in his hands. "But she asked me every day whether I was going to fix it. And she said you told her that knowing what you want is the important part." "I did say that," Emma said. "You were telling her about her comic book." "I was telling her about her comic book," she agreed. She applied it more broadly. A short silence. Emma looked out the window. The January street was quiet. A Saturday morning, a few people walking, the pale light that Connecticut produces in winter, as if the sky is conserving something. "How is she really?" Emma said. He hesitated, not because he wanted to deceive her, but because answering honestly required saying something about the last 5 weeks that he hadn't said out loud to anyone. "She's been quieter," he said. "Not badly, she's okay, but—" He stopped. "She went quiet the same way after Lydia. Not the same degree, not the same situation, I understand that. But I recognized the pattern, and He put the mug down. "I caused it. That's what I'm sitting with." Emma was looking at him steadily. "She'll be fine," he said. "She's resilient in a way I don't fully understand and mostly just try not to interfere with. But I did something that hurt her, and I'm not going to pretend I didn't." "You were hurt," Emma said. "What I told you. It was a lot to land on someone all at once, and I should have—" "Don't," he said. "I'm not here to split it evenly. You can do your part of the accounting separately. I'm here to do mine." She looked at him. Something shifted in her face, not surprise exactly, but recognition. He picked up the mug again. He had things to say, and he'd arranged them in something like an order on the drive over. But sitting here, they were rearranging themselves into whatever order they actually wanted to come in, which was irritating. "My mother wrote you a letter," he said, "and in it she said that I'd learn to keep what I feel under strict management. She said it was killing something in me slowly." He looked at the table. She was right. She was almost always right, it was a quality I found maddening when she was alive, and now I find it. He stopped. "Now I just miss it." Emma said nothing. She was giving him the room for it, which was something she did consistently. She didn't fill silences the way people do when they're uncomfortable with them. She just let them be what they were. "The night in the music room," he said. "When you told me about her, my first response was anger. That part was honest. But underneath the anger was something else, and I've had 5 weeks to figure out what it was." "What was it?" she asked quietly. "Fear," he said. "The same fear it's always been. That if I trust something completely, I lose it. That caring too much is a direct line to—" He stopped. "I've been managing that fear for 4 years by making sure I don't get too far in before I find the exit. And with you, I got—" He looked up at her. "I got further in than I planned. And then you told me the thing about my mother and I had an exit. A reasonable-sounding, legitimate-seeming exit, and I took it." Emma was very still. "That's what I needed to say," he said, "that I knew what I was doing on some level, even while I was doing it. And that's the part I can't—" He shook his head. "I can't just apologize for that and leave it at that, because the apology's too easy. What I actually owe you is the acknowledgement that I saw the exit and I chose it, and it was cowardice, and you deserved better." The coffee shop was quiet around them. A couple at the far table, the owner behind the counter, the street outside doing its Saturday morning business. None of it impinging on the small, specific world of their table. Emma looked at him for a long time. He held the look without flinching, which cost him something, because he was not accustomed to being seen this clearly and just staying in it. "Can I say my part now?" she said. "Yes." She turned her mug slightly on the table. "I should have told you sooner," she said, "not because I owed it to you as an employer, but because of what was growing between us. Once something real was happening, once it wasn't just the job anymore, I should have found a way to say it." She looked at the mug. "I kept finding reasons why now wasn't the right time. It was too soon, then it was too established, then it was Christmas, and I didn't want to—" She stopped. "I was protecting myself as much as I was protecting you. I want to be honest about that." "I know," he said. "I was afraid you'd do exactly what you did," she said. "And so I waited until I couldn't wait anymore, and by then the only moment available was a candlelit room during a storm, which is possibly the worst context for a complicated disclosure." He almost smiled. "The timing was bad." "The timing was terrible," she said. "I'm good at a lot of things. Timing is not one of them." He sat with all of it for a moment. The full accounting, both sides of it, laid out on a table between them without excessive drama and without minimization. He'd expected this conversation to be harder, in the sense of more emotionally violent. Instead, it felt like something else, like two people removing a thing they'd both been carrying on behalf of the other and setting it down and looking at it properly for the first time. "What do you want, Emma?" he said. "Not what you came here for. Not what makes sense. What do you actually want?" She looked at him. He watched her decide in real time to answer honestly rather than carefully. "I want to go back," she said. "Not as your housekeeper. I don't know what the right word is for what I mean. I want to go back and have dinner at the table and argue with Lily about the sprinkle distribution and sit in the kitchen at 9 o'clock at night and—" She stopped. She looked out the window briefly. "I want to be in that house because I want to be in it. Not because I was placed there. Not because your mother hoped. Because I want to." She looked back at him. "That's what I want." He nodded, slowly. "I don't know exactly what I'm offering," he said. "I want to be honest about that. I know what I feel. I know it's real, and I know it's been real for longer than I've been willing to admit, but He stopped. "I'm not uncomplicated. I have a 6-year-old who has already lost one person she loved, and who has been paying attention to you since the first week you arrived. I'm a person who has demonstrated recently and clearly a capacity for doing exactly the wrong thing when I'm scared. He looked at her. I'm not selling it very well. No, she said, but I'm not going to tell you it'll be perfect. I'm not going to tell you I've figured out how to stop being afraid. I haven't. I probably won't. He looked at her directly. What I can tell you is that I don't want to manage this one. I don't want to find another exit. I'm done looking for the exit. Emma looked at him across the table. The pale January light was coming through the window and landing on the table between them, not doing anything poetic, just existing. The ordinary light of an ordinary winter Saturday morning. Your mother, she said carefully, asked me to look after you. And when I read her letter before I left Prague, I thought it was a beautiful thing to ask, but I also thought it was probably irrelevant because I didn't know if I'd ever be near you, and the world is large and intentions are not logistics. He waited. And then the agency matched me to your house, she said, and I sat in my cousin's apartment in New Jersey and looked at the address on my phone and I thought, this is either the strangest coincidence of my life or the universe has a very dark sense of humor. She paused. I almost turned it down. He stilled. What? I almost called the agency and said I'd found another position. She looked at her mug. Because I knew what it looked like. I knew that if I walked into your house with that letter in my suitcase and you ever found out, it would look like exactly what you thought it looked like when I told you, like I'd been sent. Why did you go anyway? He asked. She was quiet for a moment. Because I had $43, she said, and because I thought I could keep it separate. The letter, your mother's request, all of it. I thought I could just be the housekeeper and do my job well, and that I wouldn't let it become anything that needed to be disclosed. She almost smiled, but it didn't quite make it all the way. I was wrong about that. You were wrong about that, he agreed. About which part? About keeping it separate, he said. You can't be yourself in a house for 4 months and keep anything separate. She looked at him. The almost smile came back, and this time it completed itself. Not the careful private version she kept in reserve, but the one he'd heard that morning in the kitchen with the rolling pin, real and slightly undignified and entirely hers. No, she said. I couldn't. He picked up his coffee and found it had gone cool, and he drank it anyway, and she did the same with hers, and they sat there in the quiet coffee shop in Bridgeport on a January morning, and outside the window the ordinary world continued in its ordinary way, oblivious to the two people inside it who were very slowly and imperfectly choosing each other without a script and without a guarantee, and without anything to fall back on except the thing itself. Come home, he said. Not back, not to the house. He said home, and they both heard it. Emma looked at him for a long moment. He watched her process it, not suspiciously, not looking for the catch, just taking the word seriously, the way she took everything seriously that deserved it. Not as the housekeeper, she said. No, he said. Not as the housekeeper. I'll need to find a way to contribute that isn't Emma. I'm not going to just... I know, he said. I know you're not. We'll figure that out. He paused. You speak 3 languages and you have a music education and you can organize a household and apparently you can get a woman who hasn't smiled at a customer in 40 years to immediately tell you things about me in Czech. I don't think the contribution question is going to be a problem. She looked at him. Also, he said more quietly, Lily needs her piano teacher back. Mr. Ferris, not Mr. Ferris, he said. A silence. Emma looked at the table and he watched something move through her. Not quite sadness, not quite happiness, but the particular feeling of something that has been held at arm's length for a very long time being allowed to come closer. She's been working on a piece, Emma said. She started it before. We were doing a simplified version of a Schubert melody. She said she wanted to learn it because she'd heard me play it. He remembered the night of the storm. The impromptu that moved quickly and had that quality of brightness that was also somehow melancholy. He hadn't known Lily had been awake. She heard it from her room, Emma said. She told me the next day. She said it sounded like something that was happy and sad at the same time, and she wanted to know how one thing could be both. He sat with that for a moment, happy and sad at the same time. His 6-year-old daughter, who had been drawing faces and writing comic books and asking questions about her mother and talking about the biggest dog in the world, had listened to a piano from her bedroom and asked how one thing could be both things. He didn't fully have an answer to that question. He suspected the answer was just, that's what most true things are, but it felt like something you had to live toward rather than explain. "I'll come," Emma said, "but I need a week." He looked at her. "I have to give my cousin notice, and I have some things to sort out with the visa extension. I was supposed to update my address and I didn't because I wasn't sure where I was going to be." She met his eyes. "I'm also going to be honest with you. I'm afraid." "Of what?" "Of the same thing you're afraid of," she said. "That it'll go wrong, that Lily gets more attached, that I get more attached, that it becomes something real, and then something real goes wrong, and—" She stopped. "I don't have a clean answer for that. I'm just telling you what's true." "I know," he said. "I don't have a clean answer for it either." "So we just do it anyway," he said, scared and imperfect and without a guarantee. He looked at her. "I don't know another way." She looked at him for a long moment, then she picked up her mug and found it empty and set it back down. "I'll need the room on the second floor," she said, "the one with the window facing the garden." "It's yours," he said. "And I'll cook," she said, "not because it's my job, because I want to." "All right." "And the piano," she said it carefully. "I want to use it, not just for Lily's lessons. I want to play." "The dust cover is already off," he said. "It's been off since the night of the storm." She went still. He looked at her. "I didn't put it back," he said. "I kept meaning to, and I didn't. I think—" He stopped. "I think I wasn't ready to close it again." They sat with that. The owner came by, lifted her eyebrows at the empty mugs, and Emma said something brief in Czech. The woman looked at Grayson. She said something back, apparently to Emma, but with her eyes on him. Emma listened and said a single word in response. "What did she say?" Grayson asked, after the woman had gone. "She said you have an honest face," Emma said. "She says she can always tell." "What did you say?" Emma picked up her coat from the chair beside her. "I said I know." He paid for the coffee over her objection, which she made on principle, and he declined on the same grounds, and they walked out of the coffee shop into the January air, which was cold in the precise, clear way of a day that isn't trying to be anything other than cold. The street was busier than it had been when he'd arrived. They stood on the sidewalk outside. "1 week," she said. "1 week," he agreed. She adjusted the canvas bag on her shoulder. He stood with his hands in his coat pockets. Neither of them moved immediately. The street went on around them, a woman with a stroller, 2 men talking outside a hardware store, a car that needed a new muffler going past. Ordinary Saturday morning business, the world in its regular motion. "Your mother," Emma said. She was looking at the ground briefly, then up at him. "She talked about you in those letters the way she was proud of you. Not of the company or the money, of the person." She paused. "She said you had your father's stubbornness and her tendency to care more than was probably wise, and that she hoped you'd find someone who appreciated both." He looked at her. "I think she would be—" Emma stopped. "I think she'd be glad." He nodded. He couldn't fully speak around that one. He just nodded, and she understood, and they stood on the sidewalk in the cold, and after a moment he said, "Drive safe. Back to your cousins." "It's a bus," she said. "Right." He paused. "Do you need—" "I'm fine," she said. "I've been taking buses my whole life." She almost smiled. "I even go the wrong direction occasionally." He looked at her. "That was how we met," he said. "I know," she said. "Wrong bus, right place." She shifted the bag on her shoulder and turned to go. He stood and watched her walk up the street, the canvas bag, the coat, the particular way she moved, not hurrying, not performing, just going where she was going with the full weight of herself. He watched her until she turned the corner. Then he got in his car and sat in it for a moment before starting it. He thought about his mother in a Vienna hotel, noticing a 19-year-old who needed help, stopping when it would have been easier not to. He thought about the years of letters, the quiet thread of connection maintained across continents and circumstances. He thought about a dying woman writing a letter, not a manipulation, not a scheme, just a hope. The simple, unguaranteed hope of a person who was running out of time and loved her son, and knew that love by itself was not enough to protect him from himself. He thought about Emma on his cousin's couch for 5 weeks with the letter in her bag, sorting out her visa extension, applying for positions, taking the wrong bus and then the right one, carrying the weight of what she knew and the weight of what she felt, and the weight of a request she'd never agreed to and never refused. He thought about Lily at the kitchen table saying, "You're different from the others," with the devastating accuracy of a child who has decided to be honest because no one has taught her yet that honesty is optional. He started the car. The drive back to Greenwich took 40 minutes. He pulled up the driveway at 11:15 and came in through the front door to find Lily at the kitchen table with her sketchbook, the knit hat on, a glass of juice half drunk beside her. She looked up when he came in. He hung up his coat. He sat down across from her. "Well?" she said. "She's coming back," he said. 1 week. Lily put down her pencil. She looked at him with those dark, particular eyes. Then she reached across the table and patted the back of his hand twice, briskly, with the air of someone confirming a satisfactory outcome. "Good," she said. She picked up her pencil. "I figured out the jewel thing, by the way." He blinked. "The comic book?" "Mira decides it matters," Lily said. "That the bad thing happened to him first. It doesn't make what he did okay. But Mira decides she needs to know the whole story before she decides what to do. Because she says you can't judge something if you only look at part of it." He sat with that. "That's a good decision," he said. "I know," Lily said. "I worked on it all week." He looked at his daughter, this specific, serious, too perceptive person who had been arriving daily into his life with her own view of things since before he knew who he was becoming. And he felt the full weight of what it meant to be her father. Not the responsibility of it, which he'd understood for years, the privilege of it, the specific, unrepeatable privilege of being the person she told things to and patted on the hand and waited for to figure things out. He got up. He went to the stove. He looked at the spoon in the crock. "Can I try the soup again?" he said. "The orange one. Will you help?" Lily looked up from her sketchbook. "I can tell you what Emma said about the onions." "Go ahead." "You cook them until they're almost gone," Lily said. "She told me too. She said most people don't wait long enough." He took down a pot. He found the onions. He started cooking them low, the way you were supposed to, and waited the way you were supposed to, and didn't rush it. The week went the way weeks go when you're waiting for something. Too slowly in the mornings, too fast in the evenings, with a particular suspension to the middle days when the endpoint feels both closer and further than arithmetic suggests. He told Dana, who said nothing except good, in the tone of someone who had been waiting for a specific outcome and is too experienced to say "I told you so," but lets the restraint do the work. He called Mr. Ferris and explained that Lily would have an additional teacher from now on, which Mr. Ferris accepted with the equanimity of a man who understood that his job was the scales and the theory, and that the real teaching came from somewhere harder to quantify. He had the piano tuned. He called someone on Tuesday, and they came Wednesday, and the technician spent 2 hours in the music room while Lily did her homework at the kitchen table, and Grayson tried to work upstairs and failed. And afterward, the piano had its proper voice back, not dramatically different, just fully itself in the way it hadn't quite been since the storm. He left the dust cover off. On Thursday, he had a difficult call with the Singapore office, and afterward he came downstairs and made coffee, and stood in the kitchen in the particular way of a man who has had a difficult call and needs the room to decompress in. And he stood there and thought about nothing specific and several things in general, and the kitchen was warm and empty around him. And he was okay with the emptiness in a way he hadn't been for a while, because it was the kind of emptiness that was temporary rather than permanent. That distinction, he was learning, made most things livable. Emma texted Friday night. "Tomorrow. Is the afternoon all right?" "Around 2. He texted back. "The herbs on the windowsill. I overwatered them. I'm sorry." A pause. Then, "Which ones?" He went to look. The small ones. The ones that were already the right size. Another pause. Those were time. I'll bring more. They grow back. He put the phone down and looked at the window. Outside, the February sky was doing the thing it does in Connecticut just before the month turns. Still cold, but with a quality of light that suggests the planet has been quietly negotiating with the sun on everyone's behalf and has reached a preliminary agreement. Saturday arrived the way Saturday does when you've been waiting for it. Plainly, without ceremony, just the next day after Friday, the light coming in at the same angle as always. He was not 15 minutes early this time. He was in the kitchen, drinking coffee, when the car came up the drive. Lily heard it first. She was at the table in her pajamas and her hat, and she didn't say anything. She just looked at him, and he nodded. And she got down from her chair with a dignity that suggested she was trying very hard not to run. He stayed at the kitchen counter. He heard the front door. He heard Lily's voice, the full version, the unguarded version, the one that took up its proper amount of space. He heard the lower sound of Emma's response, not the words, just the register of it. Then footsteps down the hall, and Lily came back into the kitchen still talking, and Emma came behind her with the canvas bag on her shoulder and a small pot in her hands. Time, he could see it, already growing. She looked at him across the kitchen. He looked at her. "The onions," he said. I waited longer. Did it work? Better than the first try. She set the time on the windowsill. She set her bag down. She looked around the kitchen, at the spoon in the crock, at the herbs, at the table where Lily was already climbing back into her chair and pulling her sketchbook toward her to show Emma the jewel thief resolution, at the morning light coming in the window at the angle it came in at this time of year, in this house, that she knew because she'd watched it for 4 months. "The piano," she said. "Tuned," he said. She nodded. Lily was already talking, the full-speed version, the comic book unfolded on the table. Mira and the jewel and the villain whose reasons mattered even though his actions didn't. The whole complicated moral architecture of a story a 6-year-old had built from the inside out. Emma sat down across from Lily and looked at the drawings with the clear-eyed attention she'd always given them. Grayson stayed at the counter for a moment, then he moved to the table. He sat down. He wrapped his hands around his mug and listened to his daughter explain the things she'd figured out. That you can't judge something if you only see part of it, that the whole story matters even when parts of it are hard, that people are rarely only one thing. And he listened, and Emma listened, and the kitchen was warm in the particular way it had been warm for 4 months and had not been warm for 5 weeks. And the morning did what mornings do, which is simply continue. There was no dramatic resolution, no orchestral swell, no moment where everything was fixed and clean and guaranteed. That's not how it works, and anyone who has lived long enough in a house with real people knows that. What there was, instead, was this. A man who had spent 4 years learning to be alone, deciding one more time that it wasn't what he wanted. A woman who had carried a letter across an ocean and a secret through 4 months and a heartbreak through 5 weeks, sitting at a kitchen table and not carrying it anymore. A 6-year-old with a knit hat and a theory about justice that she'd worked out on her own. A piano in the next room with its voice back. Time on the windowsill. A wooden spoon in a crock by the stove, still in the place it had been left. These are the things that last, not the grand gestures, not the declarations made in the rain, not the neat resolution where every loose thread is tied. What lasts is a kitchen that smells like someone cooked in it. What lasts is a child who is allowed to ask her questions and be taken seriously. What lasts is 2 people who were honest with each other about what they wanted, even when what they wanted was complicated and imperfect and came with no warranty. Grayson's mother had hoped. That was what she'd had available to her, and she'd used it without knowing what would come of it, because that's all any of us can do with the time we have and the people we love and the distance between what we wish for them and what we're able to arrange. It turned out to be enough. Not because the universe owed her an answer, or because things work out the way they should, because they don't, not always, not even often. But because a woman in a Vienna hotel had once noticed a girl who needed help and had stopped. Because that girl had grown up and carried the memory of that kindness for 11 years and had shown up at an iron gate with $43 and an honest answer to a direct question. Because a man in a gray dress shirt had sat across from her at his kitchen table and had listened and had recognized, even before he was ready to admit it, that something was beginning. And because a 6-year-old with a stuffed rabbit and a comic book and a theory about the curly parsley had watched all of it and held her breath and waited, with the patience of a person who understands that the people you love sometimes have to find their way to each other through the long way around. Lily looked up from her sketchbook. She looked at Emma, then at her father, then back at Emma. "Will you play later?" she said. "The happy and sad one?" "After lunch," Emma said. "Can I listen from the hallway?" "You can listen from inside the room," Emma said. "You don't have to stand in the hallway." Lily considered this. "I like the hallway," she said. "It sounds different from the hallway." Emma looked at Grayson. He looked at Emma. It was the look of two people who have been let in on the same thing by a 6-year-old and are choosing not to examine it too closely because it is already exactly what it needs to be. "The hallway it is," Emma said. Outside, February light lay across the garden. The bare shapes of the roses were beginning to show the first suggestion of something at the tips. Too early to call it growth, just the possibility of it. The hedge's way of indicating that it had been paying attention to the season and had not given up. In the kitchen, someone was going to have to start lunch soon. The morning was not going to last. There were dishes and groceries and piano lessons and homework and quarterly reviews and visa paperwork and a comic book that still needed its final chapter and time that needed a particular amount of light and not too much water. All of it still to do. All of it still unresolved in the 100 small ways that real life stays unresolved. But in the kitchen of a house that had been empty and was not empty anymore, around a table with 3 people who had found each other through need and coincidence and a dead woman's hope and their own stubborn choosing, the morning continued. And that, in the end, was more than enough.